Hello everyone. I just wanted to make a response today to a certain video by an uploader by the name of Stone, I believe is how you pronounce his YouTube name. It's spelled in a weird way, so I don't know if that's the exact pronunciation, but whatever. This is going to be a response to his video, and I want to specify that this video is going to make some generalizations of MRAs, since it's going to be kind of a critique of MRAs as well as a direct response to his videos. And I also want to stress the point that this video is going to, at times, answer general questions that Stone himself may not have specifically asked in his video or addressed in his video. And the reason I'm not going to specify every point in this video where I'm speaking directly to Stone or in a generalized sense about MRAs in particular is because, well, this video ended up being over 15,000 words long. I have no idea how long it's going to be, but I do know it's going to be very long, and I know it would be burdensome if I took the time to specify when I'm switching between those two modes of inquiry and answer in this entire video. So I'm going to basically leave it to the listener to determine when that is. So the video I'm responding to, I believe, is MGTOW Going Your Way versus MGTOW Ideology. I believe that's the title. If not, it's going to be in the description box for you to watch for yourself. So we're going to get right down to it then.
As I said before, the MGTOW lifestyle is all about liberation and integrity. And this particular liberation requires two important activities. It requires saying no and giving up hope. This means saying no to women, saying no to being their provider, their protector, and their lawfully wedded husband, their pet, their slave, their succor, their white knight, their enabler, their hero, their sidekick, their ego booster, etc., etc. It also means giving up on the fantasy of a happy, stable marriage with 2.5 kids, a dog, and a white picket fence, a satisfying sex life, and just about everything that is considered to be traditional. These two activities are something that most men struggle with, so they require some form of additional motivation. At this junction, you do need a reason to be MGTOW, but you really don't need a reason not to be MGTOW. This ideological side of MGTOW is there to supply that missing motivation and rationale. And this can be broken down again into two basic types of reasons. Individual reasons, this is how I benefit from being a MGTOW. My own safety, my own freedom, my own happiness, my own integrity, my own fulfillment. This way, I don't end up as another empty shell of a human being, another wage slave, or another suicide victim. Perhaps I should explain what a wage slave means in this particular context. A wage slave is one of those countless, unfortunate, divorced men who have kids that they aren't allowed to see and are forced to work, but can't keep the vast majority of their income due to taxes, child support payments, and alimony, which all goes to support a family that the man has been completely alienated from. And in addition to that, it goes to support millions of single mothers that the man has no relationship with and who have been effectively bribed by government policy to kick men out of their lives and the lives of their children. Wage slavery is alienated labor. Which brings me to the second type of reasons. These are collective reasons. This is how we benefit as a group from being MGTOW. That is through empowering men, through collective bargaining and negotiating with women, through men going on strike, through boycotting relationships with women, through maintaining solidarity with other men, through altering society, through collective consciousness raising, through taking the red pill and choosing to acknowledge the ugliness and isolation of the cold, harsh reality that most people find too disturbing to even talk about, or even think about, through liberating other men from their exploitation at the hands of women, and also through liberating women from their dependence on the labor and sacrifice of men. The individual reasons give MGTOW ideology a distinctly libertarian flavor, and the collective reasons give it more of a Marxist flavor. That shouldn't be too surprising to anybody. MGTOW ideology is a mix of left and right, individualism and collectivism, and it's strongly opposed to both conservatism and feminism. There's also some tension and confusion about what the MGTOW stance really entails, because while male liberation and male solidarity are quite different goals, they're not opposites either. Liberation and freedom can often promote unity and solidarity, and unity and solidarity, in turn, can often promote liberation and freedom. This MGTOW ideology stems from this MGTOW struggle against human nature, as well as the MGTOW struggle against current social norms and taboos, in order to promote the MGTOW way of life. So on the one hand, the MGTOW ideologue is at war with his own sexist instincts. The reality is, try as we may to deny it, we are all sexists, in a sense, because we're all animals. Why do I say that? Because sexual segregation is both natural and universal. Women tend to have mostly female friends and female role models, and men tend to have mostly male friends and male role models. Heterosexual orientation is both normal and natural, and people do still make babies the old-fashioned way, by having sex. This is all the sort of sexism that we just take for granted. Generally speaking, women also understand each other more easily, and men understand each other more easily, due to greater similarity and greater familiarity. Men treat men and women differently, and women also treat men and women differently. Not better, not worse, just differently. I could explain exactly why I say that. I've done that in other videos, but for the sake of brevity, I won't do that here. However, it's also very easy to cherry-pick the facts and use misleading analogies in order to arrive at the conclusion that one sex or the other actually does have it worse, even though it's really not true. Human beings are all motivated by the same primitive needs for survival, security, and love. In my opinion, it's much better to try and tame and work with our inner beast than it is to work against it, or to try to destroy it, or deny its existence. And it's very important to remember that it is not only those other people who are animals. You're an animal too. Having said that, not everyone is equally tame and civilized, even though we all share the same primitive instincts. It's really not fair to paint all people with the same brush, because our most primal and immutable motives and intentions are irrelevant when it's our culture or our actual behavior, and not our drives, that really should be the subject of scrutiny and judgment. But civilization is not necessarily the goal for MGTOW ideology, because the MGTOW ideologue is also at war with cultural norms and expectations, which they see as being set up to primarily benefit women at the expense of men. And this is very similar but opposite to the radical feminist view of society, which they call patriarchy. With that in mind, I'm now going to list the core elements of what I see as the MGTOW ideology, as best represented by some of the most popular and influential MGTOW vloggers, like Barbarossa, Stardust, and That Cynical Cynicism. Those core elements are essentialism, sophistry and pseudoscience, gynophobia and misogyny, projection, and apathy and nihilism.
Yes, it does mean saying no to being women's lawfully wedded husband. Keyword there being lawful, as in contractual lawful obligations. Yes, MGTOW do reject this. But I don't know who told you, Stone, that a satisfying sex life cannot be a part of a MGTOW's life. This is untrue. I'm quite content with my sex life. In fact, my sex life has only improved by going my own way. And as to the claim that a satisfying sex life is somehow included in, according to you, just about everything that can be considered traditional, this is also false. My experience is that marriage actually decreases the amount and quality of sex in terms of frequency and variety. When I have talked to people that have either been married for years or married for years and then divorced, all of them say pretty much identically the trend of marriage being, or sex in marriage being very frequent in the beginning and then tapering off as the years go on. We are sentient apes that have been fucking and excessively fucking each other for millennia, and before even the first scrap of recorded history was cataloged, we've been fucking, and we've been doing this before the human being could even conceive or grasp what a tradition is. Now, further into your rant, you go through how, quote, ideological MGTOW supply a reason to be MGTOW, and you define these reasons as individualistic and collectivistic, and then you frame these filters via a libertarian and Marxist lens, which is wholly unnecessary, but we're going to get to that in a little bit. Now, I think perhaps, Stone, that you're confusing us with MRAs, because MGTOW, like you've said in your video, don't negotiate with women. We don't wish to control women or persuade them to do anything. We simply force them out of our conversations and make sure they aren't present when we're sharing our ideas. And the reason for this is because this serves the function of ensuring to a 100% certainty that the documented behavior of women inserting themselves into communities, particularly male-dominated communities, and changing the narrative to suit their interests does not occur. In order to do this, no negotiation is necessary. All that is required is for men to have a space to get together and talk amongst themselves. And this is one of the many reasons why MGTOW reject marriage and why we say that MGTOW men cannot be married, because we are aware of the proxy influence that women wield through their men. And in the case of marriage, their, quote, their men is certainly the correct term. Indeed, since any married man is by government decree owned by his wife and the state. So we simply cannot afford for the proxy influence women exert onto their husbands to seep into MGTOW spaces. You can call this paranoia if you wish, but in an examination of the current state of affairs of the men's rights movement, not MGTOW, but the men's rights movement, will reveal to you that this dynamic is occurring in the form of female favoritism already in the men's rights movement. And this is why somebody like Shieldwife, for example, has more subscribers than men who invented the things that she's repeating in her videos. Now, in terms of men going on strike, I assume you're referring to a marriage strike, which again is something that MGTOW generally don't subscribe to, since the word strike implies we want to renegotiate a contract and continue marrying after the terms are more in our favor. This is not the case. We wish to reject marriage altogether, since it is at best an institution that is highly susceptible to feminist control and anti-male legal bias, and at worst, just plainly overtly misandry and exploitative of men. So, now, going back to your earlier comments, around 10 minutes in, you make the distinction between the individualistic reasons and collectivist reasons for MGTOW as having libertarian and Marxist connotations respectively. And so that makes me, kind of smell the generic defeat the left conspiracy fumes looming on the horizon, but we'll see about that. For now, we're going to skip to about 11 minutes in and address the points you make here. Now, you say it's easy to cherry pick facts to make it seem like one sex has it worse off, even though this is not really true. Well, let's ask the question, is that the case? Is it really not true? Men having higher rates of homelessness, higher rates of suicide, higher rates of military deaths, men being the only gender that gets drafted, men being the overwhelming victims of violent crime. We can't use these things to determine whether or not men as a gender have it worse than women. We can't do that. Objective statistical analysis that tells us life expectancy, for example, which is most certainly relatable, at least in part, to quality of life, being less for men than it is for women across the board, regardless of culture. This can't be used to infer whether or not men objectively have it worse than women. Well, I disagree. Now, in regards to you saying that human beings should work to try to work with our inner beast instead of destroy it or deny its existence, this is exactly what MGTOW do. And perhaps I think, Stone, that it's your selective filter that chooses to ignore the myriad of examples over the hundreds of videos that MGTOW posts talking about self-mastery, learning the biological compulsions that drive men towards servility to the female sex, and learning how to control them and master them and even harness them. I don't know if perhaps your definition of not ignoring or seeking to destroy our biological compulsion boils simply down to embracing a traditional gender role setup and nothing else, but MGTOW, for the record, do plenty of self-introspection along these lines. You say it's not fair to paint all people with a broad brush. I say that it isn't what MGTOW is doing, since we are conducting an analysis on a macro scale where an exception can, in fact, prove the rule if the general trend is prominent enough. Now, at no point do we say that all women act as a homogeneous, undifferentiated mass of people. That's silly. In fact, when you say that men treat men differently, and vice versa, that women treat women differently, how, Stone, did you come to that conclusion? Did you, observe men and women and draw a conclusion based on their general behaviors? Well, According to you, that's an awfully broad brush you're waving right there, isn't it? Now, are you allowed, Stone, to generalize genders and not MGTOW? Surely, if you can generalize and draw these conclusions, then MGTOW can do the same. And maybe this will help you see that for the purposes of what we're doing, what MGTOW are doing, we have to analyze and generalize. And the only reason this is a problem, I suspect, is because MGTOW generalized women in a way that you don't like. We also happen to generalize men, and that amongst MRAs at least seems to be selectively accepted, while generalizations about women, if they're negative, are universally attacked by the same flavor of MRA. And this is a strong indication of the prevalence of gynocentrism. Whenever women can get away with saying or doing things that men can't, that group or community is usually, more often than not, a gynocentric one. And this is the overall trend in society, as well as the trend in the micro-society of MRA subculture. Since, in fact, a great part of their strategy, a great part of their MRA strategy, at least the MRA, the flavor of MRA that I'm describing to you right now, is to employ women when more controversial things have to be said, so that they, the women speaking these things, can't be labeled misogynist by other women. And in doing this, they manage to reinforce the very things they claim to be fighting, while at the same time tacitly acknowledging the different generalized behaviors of both genders in the process. I mentioned this in earlier videos. I believe it was the concern trolling video. Now, you say, Stone, that it's our culture and not our biological drives that should be scrutinized. But I disagree. I believe culture is a function of biology, and the differences in culture that we see arise from a fixed human nature adapting to a variable environment. But still, even with that said, MGTOW can and do scrutinize culture, and I've just, for example, analyzed a subset of MRA culture which structures itself along the belief that women are less likely to call other women misogynist and get away with it. And this conclusion, as I've just said, cannot have been reached by MRAs without generalizing female behavior and capitalizing off of that female behavior, as well as male behavior. Now, as to you saying, Stone, that MGTOW views civilization as primarily set up to benefit women, not all men, well, again, I'm going to have to repeat. Men having higher rates of homelessness, higher rates of suicide, higher rates of military death, men being the only gender that gets drafted, men being the overwhelming victims of violent crime, male rape being joked about, women receiving less time of incarceration than their male counterparts for the same crimes. Yes, it appears that civilization is primarily set up to benefit women and not men. And no, it is not anti-civilization to say so, because by definition, this is not civilized behavior. Civilized behavior, at least we'd like to think, structures itself among leaving the barbarous manifestations of our primitive instincts behind. That is not doing that. Creating a legal system which gives everybody the opportunity for a fair and just defense if they're accused of a crime. That is part of civilization. That is civilized behavior. So if it's anti-civilization to say that this is wrong, right? If that's anti-civilization, then our civilization is at odds with the truth and is lying to itself, which arguably is the cause for a lot of the problems that men are facing today. Now, on top of all this, another justification for painting women in particular with a broad brush that isn't always talked about is the propensity for negative consequences as a result of ignoring a generalization of a group being proportional to the likelihood that people will act in accordance with those generalizations. Pit bulls have a reputation for being aggressive dogs. Now, it could very well be that this reputation is a result of unfounded generalizations of pit bulls. It could be argued that toy poodles are just as aggressive as pit bulls, but the potential for damage as a result of being attacked by a pit bull is much higher than it is for a toy poodle. So we, in order to be on the safe side, automatically reinforce this generalization more for pit bulls. And that's okay, that's fine. Where it becomes a problem is when these generalizations become codified into the general consensus. And this is why you see no opposition from women in response to feminists having passed primary aggressor laws. The truth is, gentlemen, that women and feminists fear men. Women fear men, so they advocate for laws that assume men are the default perpetrators of domestic violence in order to mitigate that fear. And in doing so, women go much further in their generalizations of men than MGTOW do in their generalizations of women. They enforce their generalizations at the legal level. And your average woman, be assured of this, your average woman on the street is not going to disagree with the primary aggressor laws, and your average woman on the street will assume that men commit the most domestic violence, even though they don't, and will not be signing any petitions anytime soon for pro-male domestic violence law reform. And so you see, MRAs like Stone, they're not going to take women to task for that, for their either overt or implicit legalization of their generalizations of men. But when MGTOW make these generalizations, keep in mind, without running to the government and legislating our beliefs on female behavior to reflect our laws, then that's a problem. There isn't a problem, according to these people, that traditionalist women like Phyllis Schlafly went out of their way to legally enforce the fact that men are generally better soldiers than women, to get women off of having to sign up for selective service. That legalized generalization is okay, and I assume they're going to explain it away by saying, well, we can't change our biology, that's just how it is. Legalized generalizations of men, that's okay with them. But if MGTOW tell men to avoid marriage because women become in marriage like essentially divorce-prone pit bulls with a high capacity to do serious harm and damage to men, that's a problem to these guys. Legally generalizing men into a primary aggressor status, the fact that women aren't marching in the streets to address that injustice, that's okay. Legally generalizing men into a conscription registry, that's not a problem, but recommending to men to generalize women in a non-legal capacity by avoiding certain things like the marriage contract, that's a problem. And it's a problem born out of the fact that the society we've built expects men to prop up a noble lie for women. And that noble lie is starting to unravel, and MGTOW are smart and correct to point it out. Now, Stone claims that labeling this as proof that our society is a gynocentric one, concerned first and foremost with the well-being and safety of women, is similar to the radical feminist view of patriarchy, or the patriarchy, TM. Now, I contend that it is not. I contend that this tired MRA talking point that gynocentrism is the MGTOW equivalent of the feminist patriarchy theory is easily refuted by asking the simple question of where's the force. Again, we don't force women to pay taxes to us. We don't force women to be drafted. We don't use the state to coerce women in any way. Women do. And they use things like the patriarchy to justify that. And another fundamental difference between this silly false equation is that patriarchy theory asserts that men have colluded. That is, voluntarily colluded to oppress women and keep them out of academia and employment and other institutions. Right? They assert that men have knowingly oppressed women, while MGTOW asserts that gynocentrism is largely unconscious behavior that is practiced not only by women with respect to men, but by men with respect to men as well. And this false equivalency that MRAs such as this have become so fond of using is a trademark deflection they seem to have adopted from the very people they claim to fight. That is the feminists, right? It's designed to stifle debate by using a carefully crafted MRA obsession with making feminism the one and only enemy that men face, for the purposes of deflection against anyone that implies that feminism is just a symptom or a manifestation of a greater phenomena. It's designed to shut down any debate using the tactic of guilt by association, much like feminists will instead of debating a white anti-feminist, for example. They'll simply dismiss him as a racist, even if he has a valid point. And in the same fashion, the SADF, or same as the feminist smear, is used to keep the responsibility of the mess men are in from ever falling on the shoulders of women. And to be clear, the responsibility is shared by both men and women. But the difference here is that these MRAs like Stone, they don't mind responsibility or blame being assigned to men, since of course they expect adult behavior from men. It's only when women's hand in this is brought up that they have a collective conniption fit and level this baseless accusation at MGTOW. And so along with this deflection, they beat around the bush and they blame their, elites of choice, leftists, cultural Marxists, the Jews, and we're going to get into that deeper in just a little bit. But for now, let's continue listening here.
The first element of MGTOW ideology is essentialism. All women are like that. This is just a meme which can have many different meanings. Ideological MGTOWs want to describe and explain the female behavior that they've witnessed, but they need a sense of certainty in the face of people telling them to reconsider being MGTOW. They will hear people say, "Some women are marriageable, you just need to find the right woman." Or, "Your bad experiences are a result of your poor choices in women." And some of them will claim that women have the power to choose their partner, but that men don't have that power, or that men have less power to select a mate than women do. This is a poorly conceived notion that can very easily be refuted with a little bit of common sense and some mathematics. Ideological MGTOWs are quick to generalize from their particular experiences with women to all women, And when anyone tries to bring this fact to light, they identify that as NAWALT, which stands for Not All Women Are Like That, and dismiss it, as if recognizing a valid argument and then giving it an acronym like NAWALT is somehow a refutation. All women are like that. That is the implication of this line of thought. Like what, you ask? Well, we can't really be sure about what exactly. That depends. But we can be sure that all women are like that, whatever that is. You see, MGTOWs have to give up on marriage and kids, and the idea that not all women are like that threatens to give them some hope, and perhaps more disappointment down the road. Therefore, the idea that not all women are like that needs to be aggressively rejected. It's that simple. But just for the record, not all MGTOWs are like that. For example, Razorblade Candy, Snake Plisskenist, Bernard Chapin, Grumpy Old Man, and Doom Rules are not like that. Again, I'm not generalizing about MGTOWs, I'm just talking about the overall MGTOW ideology that has become very popular and noticeable in the manosphere over the past 5 years.
Okay, again, this is another common run-of-the-mill MRA oversimplification of both the MGTOW stance on this, as well as the reality driving the development and use of the NAWALT acronym. MGTOW, again, are analyzing things on a large enough scale so that exceptions just don't matter anymore, right? And we can show a non-gendered example of this by saying that human beings are generally tribal animals that like to form themselves into clubs and then proceed to other each other for even relatively small distinctions. Now, let's say that there existed two groups of anthropologists, and these anthropologists were trying to determine a general consensus for human behavior. And one group of these anthropologists insisted that because they could find some human beings that were generally not tribalistic, that it meant that human beings aren't tribalistic. If this was the case, if we had these two groups of anthropologists, then the other group of anthropologists could develop the term NAHALT. Not all humans are like that, and they could use it, justifiably so, to ridicule the group that refuses to concede to the truth of the matter, and that is that human beings truly are, at their core, a tribalistic animal. And the entire history of our species will back this up. So, Stone, when you're saying that MGTOW are deflecting against the invalidity of NAWALT by applying the acronym of NAWALT as a deflection, this is itself an attempt at deflection. You like to use mathematics as a visual aid, so I'll return the favor and I'll disprove your point in doing so. If you've taken any calculus, Stone, you will have learned that a mathematical function has both local and global behavior, and you can observe the local behavior of a function and derive information from that, an inflection point, for example, and you can observe the global behavior of a function and derive important information from that. And frankly, Stone, your argument here, applied to the world of mathematics, would see entire branches of mathematics, the science of statistics, for example, done away with under the assumption that individual behavior negates general behavior. It would render incredibly useful mathematical concepts like deriving generalized information from a line of best fit useless. It would render nascent fields of science like biomathematical analysis insignificant because, of course, when studying a megacity, a city of the population of the size of New York, or double the size of the population of New York, you are never going to get a neat, exact little pattern. Nature is in many cases not neat and exact, and you need to infer information from general trends. And so this is a common behavior that we see amongst certain brands of MRAs, Stone in particular, this almost religious hatred of engaging in any generalization. And this, in my opinion, is born out of the men's rights movement's inability to control its own gynocentric tendencies. And again, we see this, as I've said, we see this in their propensity for favoring female MRAs. For requiring less work and talent from them than they would from men. And this is also born, I think, as well, out of a gradual influx of the disease of runaway egalitarianism that has seemed to infect a large portion of the men's rights movement. Now, you have to remember that an organization or a group or community sufficiently exposed to runaway egalitarianism will display a veritable worship of inclusiveness, even to the point of dysfunction, as well as a hatred and distrust of any kind of concrete, definitive assessment of any of the favorite groups of said egalitarian communities, with, of course, some communities being more fervently defended than others. And going back to people like Shieldwife, for example, we can see this in the fact that she's uploaded, 12 videos? And she's currently at more than 4,000 subscribers. 4,000 subscribers. And she's essentially repeating things that MRA men and MGTOW men have said way before her, right? She's repeating the inventions of men. And she has 4,000 subscribers. Think about that. Think about the fact that Razorblade Candy, right, is only about 2,000 subscribers ahead of that. And he has dozens of videos, which are, of course, of a much, much higher quality. How is this possible? Why is this possible? Well, it's because of this dynamic within the men's movement, or certain sectors of the men's movement. We all know who I'm talking about. Really just obsessively promoting women over the efforts of men, to the point where, as I've just said, it's just dysfunctional. Doesn't even work anymore. Again, we can use example after example to perfectly justify the usage of a not all insert your preferred group of choice are like that as a reference point. What NWALT really is, what it really is it's a shorthand, if you will, to a more specific debunking of an argument. I can say, for example, that gynocentrism is exemplified in women's propensity to demand the most taxpayer-funded healthcare and privileges, while at the same time knowing that men provide the most taxpayer funds. And then someone can say, well, not all taxpayers are like that. Some men leech off the system and contribute nothing, while some women are heavily taxed. And after the trillionth time of hearing this argument, knowing that stating it is simply stating an exception that proves a rule, a group who has spent ample amount of time making this exception proves the rule counter-argument, who wants to progress onto more nuanced arguments, can and will develop a shorthand, an acronym for example, to signify to the community, this argument's been heavily debunked, see XYZ for counterpoints at your leisure, and continue on with the relevant topics at hand. In MGTOW circles, XYZ would be, of course, the copious amounts of debunking of this retarded argument that's been going on for years now. Ironically, the fact that it's now MRAs bringing this nonsense up over and over again this late in the game indicates to me that MRAs have cultivated such an obsession with feminism and have gotten so accustomed to bickering with them that they seem to have internalized feminism's stuck on stupid, never generalize anything generalizations are Satan incarnate mentality. Which is why you see generally that MGTOW have been producing much better and much more insightful content than the MRA portion of the manosphere for a very long time now. It seems that MRAs are now stuck on feminist stupid in this constant attempt to try to out-victim feminist narratives, and they've so polluted their capacity for counter-argument by arguing in the feminist world with feminists for so long, unnecessarily so, I might add, that they can no longer create innovative, thought-provoking commentary on the issues that men face. And if you notice, Stone himself subtly reveals his own gynocentric thought process when he, without any evidence to support his claim, makes the assertion that the reason that MGTOW have developed this NWALT acronym is because we secretly believe that some women aren't like that, and NWALT gives us an incentive to not go out and find them. Basically, it's the equivalent of some feminists or some women saying that we're all just mad because we've had bad experiences with women and can't find the right one. You see, to the gynocentric mind, it never occurs to people like Stone that MGTOWs are behaving in their own self-interest. It always boils down to the golden uterus for these types. And then he goes on to say that not all MGTOWs are like that, right? Which is funny, because he cites, of all people, one of the most no-nonsense MGTOW I've ever come across, Razorblade Candy. Razorblade Candy. Stone, are you seriously using Razorblade Candy as a means of differentiating between, quote, radical and non-radical MGTOW? We're going to get back to that in a little bit, but I seriously think, Stone, that you haven't been listening to Razorblade's videos in a long time, as well as mine's. Because you'll know, if you have, that Razorblade Candy is possibly even more hardcore than myself in Stardust. Which, of course, is what I love about his channel. But whatever, we'll get back to that in a little bit. Grumpy Old Man seems to be Biena's White Knight, from what I can tell. Don't really care about Chapin anymore, he's irrelevant. And I know very little about Doom Rules, other than the fact that he's currently subbed to my channel and occasionally likes and retweets my videos. So with that said, let's move on to the next topic.
The second element of MGTOW ideology is sophistry and pseudoscience. The root cause is this incoherent, unfalsifiable concept. No politics allowed. You see, in theory, you could easily be both an MRA and a MGTOW. You could swear off of marriage and kids, and also fight against misandry, Marxism, and radical feminism. Why not? You could fight against the system on both the political level, as well as the personal level. In theory, but once you add the human element, it becomes much more complicated. For those who have really made up their mind and are truly devoted and dedicated to the MGTOW lifestyle, there's just no motivation to be an activist. Ideological MGTOWs see activism in politics as a harmful distraction. Activism is, for these ideologues, a total waste of time and effort. MGTOW is the only way to go. On the personal level, activism threatens to give men hope for restoring fatherhood, the nuclear family, fairness in family court, etc. And on the political level, focusing on Marxism and feminism takes the focus off of men rejecting women and marriage en masse as the solution to these imbalances. It's not that ideological MGTOWs agree with feminism. They generally think that feminism is a total bunch of lies and nonsense. But they don't view it as a real problem. And this is where they apply sophistry and pseudoscience. One common ideological MGTOW perspective is that scientific and technological advancements, such as, say, the birth control pill, washing machines, computing power, guns, and convenient and affordable energy, are responsible for all of the social, political, and economic changes that feminism has often wrongly taken credit for or been blamed for. Also, according to this perspective, political ideologies like feminism and Marxism in particular, and political activism in general, can take no credit and no blame either for modern society, for women entering the workforce, for the current divorce rate, for the breakdown of the traditional nuclear family, for fatherlessness and single mothers, for misandry in the family courts, or for anything at all. But if you make a convincing case that feminist ideology really has had effects on society, then ideological MGTOWs still have an out. They will say, okay, you're right, feminism is very powerful and influential, but feminism itself is merely a product of culture, technology, and human biological drives. Therefore, the confluence of culture, biology, and technology are the root problems, and feminism is merely a symptom of a deeper problem. Gynocentrism, they say, is like a hydra with multiple regenerating heads, and feminism is but one of its heads. If you were to cut off one of its heads, it will just grow another one. Therefore, getting rid of feminism won't actually solve any of the problems that we're seeing. And what we wrongly identify as feminism is somehow a mere consequence or a manifestation of latent gynocentrism. Gynocentrism in our evolved instincts, and gynocentrism in our culture. Except that there really is no hydra. Gynocentrism is just like patriarchy theory. Nobody wants to define it to the point where it could be falsified. But yet, they feel free to use it to explain everything that they see. It's basically the idea that men's interests are subordinate to women's interests, and that men are exploited as a class by women. This hydra, just like the real hydra, really is a mythical creature made up of half-truths and misconceptions. Just as with patriarchy theory, it explains everything and nothing at all at the same time. Since ideological MGTOWs believe that the world is gynocentric, anything that could be said about the world can then easily be attributed to its gynocentrism. Therefore, this is unfalsifiable pseudoscience. Some ideological MGTOWs also claim that women support feminism because they benefit from it, and that all women benefit from feminism as yet another tool to exploit men with. Regardless, ideological MGTOWs want to focus on the power and responsibility of women, so that the conversation is about gynocentrism instead of feminism. They will also say that there is no difference between the political right and the political left, because they're both equally gynocentric. Gynocentrism is everywhere. It's in everything. Another common ideological MGTOW argument is to say that society is so thoroughly gynocentric that the men's movement will never catch on or accomplish anything, because most people will not support anything that is perceived to contradict their gynocentric value system. and so they will never prioritize the interests of men. Personally, however, I don't think that a successful men's movement requires any general prioritization of the interests of men. This sophistry depends on the fact that the world is complex and all events are highly interdependent. It is very easy to find, or even just imagine, all kinds of causal connections. But there are often multiple causes and contributing factors behind any given phenomenon. There's rarely any good reason to rule out one causal factor just because you found a new one. However, the only causes that are worth paying much attention to are the ones that you can easily influence. And we can't change our biology.
Okay, so first we're going to tackle this MGTOW or apolitical meme, and then we're going to get into the gynocentrism is a unfalsifiable argument. Now, this MGTOW or apolitical meme is also definitively false. Some MGTOW are left-leaning, some MGTOW are right-leaning, some MGTOWs are in fact apolitical, and others are apartisan, which is exactly what I would consider myself to be. Now, I'm going to play for you a clip of just one of the videos in which I put forth political ideas and possible solutions over and over and over again. And that video is also going to be in the description box.
It should be noted, and noted clearly, that there are a great many conservatives, fiscal and constitutional or otherwise, that are concerned with rectifying genuine issues catalyzed by a great many characteristically liberal left-wing dysfunctions. And yet the above characterizations of the right-wing establishment will remain and persist despite their efforts. The purpose of this video is to address the current push within the men's rights movement towards conservative politics that translate in the end to nothing more than GOP business as usual. Now, the obviousness of left-wing establishment politics being incompatible with the goals of the men's rights activists are assumed here, and as such I will not cover them at length here. What will be addressed is the much more subtle, but just as negative implications of a right-wing affiliated men's rights movement and what specific political actions can be adopted by a politicized men's rights movement. A fledgling MRA movement, having not the political clout nor the financial capital to bring even the most simplistic male grievances to the fore, simply cannot afford to make the baggage of right-wing politics its own. Such a move would put us squarely in the trench warfare struggle of right versus left politics, where one side gains ground only to be beaten back by the other, back and forth, perpetually without either side making any real ground. Partisan wedge issues dominate left versus right politics, and any alignment on the part of the men's rights movement with the right will result in our being tasked with guarding a remote outpost, signifying our metaphorical grievances and their priority to the right, very far, far away from the front lines where the real battles take place. Abortion, the war on terror, military spending versus entitlement spending, these are the issues that a partisanized men's movement would take back seat to. Again, I want to concentrate here mostly on the futility of a male endorsement of the conservative right only as a rebut to a growing number of MRAs calling for a strictly rightist partisan approach for the purposes of mediating MRA grievances. It should be a foregone conclusion, however, that throwing our chips in with the liberal left would provide to us an equally lackluster devotion to the core issues that MRAs seek to address. Now, the old adage, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, comes to the thinking MRA's mind when surveying the landscape of right versus left partisan politics, knowing that others would have us bury our heads in the sand, urging us to take part in their rituals of ineffectuality. Their political solutions, the milquetoast, write your congressman, the blatantly disingenuous, vote conservative, they're the lesser of two evils, get Obama out of office at all costs, tedium. When pointing out the futility of pulling down a lever for Mitt Romney come election time, partisan MRAs point out that the men's rights movement, in choosing to remain apolitical, will remain forever relegated to a cyber dungeon of sorts, the internet manosphere. Admittedly, the term apolitical, a term I've used before to describe that the men's rights movement should refuse to affiliate with any political party, is a bit misleading. Apartisan is much more descriptive for my idea of the political approach that the men's rights movement should take. Political action should undoubtedly be taken sans the morass of the left or the chainmail suit of white knight chivalry that so encumbers the political right. The men's rights movement needs to be able to isolate and dispatch issues pertaining to its own interests with political expediency and without the crippling tithes that would be demanded of it under allegiance to any political party. The term as it stands is men's rights activists. Thus, our political activism should be concerned only with the issues that pertain to men's rights and the advocacy of them. When people, supporters or detractors, male or female, are confronted with the male rights activists, they should take away with them not a peculiar stench of republicanism or liberalism or any other political ism. They should take away a definitive idea that the MRA is concerned only with political issues relating to men. Now, the current conservative sales pitch is one that revolves around an, I'll say, partly flawed limited government approach. It is not flawed in its insistence of limiting government. Less government will definitively decrease the state's ability to use coercive state power against men. Where it is fundamentally flawed is in its reluctance to take part in, and even its stated goal to eliminate identity politics altogether. You see, it's human nature to advocate for one's associated group. Limiting government will never stop women from advocating on their own behalf for government benefit. No, you see, at best, limiting government will only serve to limit the amount of benefits that the varying groups bound to lobby government for their own interests will have access to. This is to say that unless conservative politics can force the state, which also operates in the interest of its own self-preservation, to operate under the absolute minimum amount of taxpayer dollars, which we all know is highly unlikely, there will always be a surplus of funds that will be designated by which political groups most effectively advocate for them. Now, I would love to live in a world where everyone agrees to play fair, where the politicized female collective will agree, alongside the politicized male collective, to simply not advocate politically for their own self-interest, but it simply is not a reality. Let's take, for example, the disparity in government funding for prostate and breast cancers. In fiscal year 2009, breast cancer research received $872 million worth of federal funding, while prostate cancer received $390 million. It's a well-known fact that prostate cancer and breast cancer kill men and women in equal rates. What happened? Women practice identity politics. They had no interest in demanding that government split the total $1.2 billion equally between the genders. They took more for themselves because they knew it would benefit their interests. It was women that kicked off massive breast cancer awareness initiatives. Men have not kicked off massive prostate cancer awareness initiatives. It was women that did the fundraising. They acted in the interest of their own gender by injecting their issues into the public consciousness. This is something that men must absolutely learn to do. Identity politics. Male identity politics is essential when considering that women will, in fact, regardless of the size of government, petition government, and successfully, I might add, for all sorts of benefits for their gender. To suggest that men should focus entirely on limiting the size of government, completely discarding any self-interest, while women will most certainly not do the same thing, is not just ineffectual, but outright dangerous in that, as you can see, it translates directly to men being taxed in the majority for services that go in the majority to the benefit of women. Now, I'm all for limiting government, and yet what will reducing the size of government do in this case? It might mean that only $100 million will be spent on prostate cancer research, with $500 million going to breast cancer research. But the disparity will still be there. Considering that men pay the majority of taxes, and will continue to do so no matter how much one shrinks government, it's time we start demanding our share by practicing a partisan identity politics. The fundamental problem with the men's rights movement adopting a partisan approach to politics is that it depends on elected officials to do our bidding. We elect politician A under the inefficient pretense of the lesser of two evils political philosophy. Politician A has obligations towards constituency B, C, and D, and finally then to us MRAs. And in the event that constituencies B, C, and D's interests outweigh to that politician that of the MRA constituency, politician A may very well, by virtue of his job security, enact legislations not in keeping with and even in direct contradiction to what his MRA constituency elected him for, and that is unacceptable. Constituencies advocating in this manner for their own self-interest via a politician must in fact render assistance to said politician's political campaign in the form of donations, in the form of public advertising, and a myriad of other political functions. All this energy expended still does not guarantee said politician's election, and said politician's election, as just mentioned, does not guarantee that he will act in keeping with the interest of one of the many constituencies that got him elected. Furthermore, the constituency in supporting said candidate now has, whether they like it or not, an affiliation with that specific candidate's political policies. This is a highly inefficient way to address our grievances in the political sphere. Take for completely hypothetical reasons the Democratic Party. Let's say tomorrow, a prominent Democratic politician started insisting that MRA issues be taken seriously, and say one of those MRA issues is a complete separation of marriage and state, meaning that the state should have absolutely no authority in the definition of marriage whatsoever. We also know that a prominent liberal Democratic issue is that of gay marriage. MRAs could decide to throw their political support behind this Democratic politician. Yet in the end, he may decide it more politically prudent to attend to the need of his other constituency, that being gay men and women advocating for government legalization and recognition of same-sex marriage. Thus, in supporting this candidate, in telling ourselves, well, at least he's not Romney or another Bush, and he does seem to support men's issues, we will have had achieved nothing other than securing another politician's livelihood for another term, while also expanding government's power to define and thus interfere into marriage, which is what got us into this mess in the first place. These ideas on marriage come not out of a desire to interfere with the political initiatives of the gay rights activists, but out of the fact that we have seen men consistently extorted and disenfranchised in all marital and familial realms of Western law. If we portray ourselves as men advocating for men, completely happy with different, ceremonial, non-governmental definitions of marriage for both heterosexual and homosexual couples, we very well may have sidestepped being at odds with an extremely well-funded and organized political infrastructure, the gay rights movement. If we were to take the same exact stance whilst affiliating ourselves with right-wing politics, we will be viewed as hostiles in a larger partisan political beef we did not start and cannot finish. Understand that no political party will ever have men's issues as the core or even the major proponent of their political platform. The political wedge issues of our time, acting in concert with biological proclivities of both men and women to protect and provide for the female gender, ensures that mixing MRA issues into either of the American political parties will result in our issues being forwarded immediately to the bottom of the political to-do list. We cannot afford to not be viewed by society as always being concerned with issues pertaining to men's rights or men's health, men's reproductive rights, male suicide, selective service, men's everything. Now, the thinking MRA, in response to the efforts of others to ring us into the GOP, may find himself in a voting booth where he will give pause almost certainly to a vote for Mitt Romney or any other conservative politician. He might ask himself about the war on terror, something that Mitt Romney will surely continue to perpetuate. He may say to himself, in voting for this presidential candidate, how many more men will die half a world away due in part to the vote I'm about to cast? He may say to himself, how will his supposed stance of limited government change the fact that my vote might contribute to the decade-plus long act of sustained misinjury that is the war on terror? But that same thinking MRA might give very little or even no pause to a class action lawsuit against the federal government citing selective service discrimination against men. He could easily understand a focused and isolated legal action stating that the government, via selective service, discriminates against men. He could read for himself that the clear intention of the class action suit is to either make women sign up as well or to do away with selective service registration altogether. The thinking MRA could easily get behind a class action lawsuit filed on the part of men demanding that hospitals have no authority to circumcise males without express adult consent of the male in question. The 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution states clearly, quote, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction, end quote. This can be taken to the Supreme Court if need be to do away permanently with alimony law. I would put my time and even my money behind such an effort. I won't, however, put my time and money behind Mitt Romney or Obama or even Ron Paul. Why? They aren't MRAs acting in the interest of men. This is something that the MRAs are going to have to do for themselves. If we want a male birth control pill, for example, men are going to have to organize, form public events in large numbers and with the media covering it, showing the relevant pharmaceutical companies that there exists a real demand for it. In doing so, we can also highlight which feminist groups are responsible for inhibiting the development of the male birth control pill. A non-biased soundbite from an MRA asking why feminists want birth control only for women would go a long way. I mean, there are a million things that we can do that Mitt Romney and his political party will never do for us. If we want things done, we're going to have to do it for ourselves. Now, if in the end you still want to go vote for a conservative or a liberal or whatever, that's your individual choice, and I'm not going to try and stop you. But I and many others will not put our support behind the same old status quo establishment politicians that haven't done a damn thing for us for half a century. And I certainly will not allow or tolerate any other MRAs trying to make me support their right-wing or left-wing agendas.
You see, some MGTOWs do in fact think that politics are a waste of time, but for the MGTOWs and even the MRAs that do wish to pursue political resistance, I upload videos like this to show that what myself and other MGTOW wish to do is to reject partisan politics, hence the name of the video clip I just played, Men's Rights Movement, Political Yet Non-Partisan, that I've laid out I don't know how many months or even years ago. Now this video in particular was designed to serve as a pushback to a bunch of simpletons who at this point have largely been discredited but are still around parroting the it was all just Marxism/leftism partisanship to the point that it was bordering really on whack job, Alex Jonesian conspiracy theory. In fact, there were MRAs at one point saying that one cannot be an MRA and not also be a strict adherent to conservative politics. So you heard that right. MRAs can pen articles excluding, I don't know, the Good Men Project, or masculinists, or people who aren't conservative enough, but they think that they have the authority to tell MGTOW that we can't exclude married folks. How convenient is that? But yes, as the video has proved, MGTOW are not necessarily non-political. We simply reject extreme partisan agendas pushed by radical MRAs attempting to insinuate themselves into the manosphere, and particularly into the MGTOW portion of the manosphere, which increasingly is the only portion of the manosphere that I give a damn about. Now, you say, Stone, that MGTOW see political activism as a total waste of time and effort. And again, this is untrue, as I've played you political suggestions in my very own video to refute this. What is a total waste of time, in my opinion, what is a total waste of effort, is bickering until the sun expands into a red giant on college campuses with feminists and calling that activism. Right? What's pointless is joining one of the two political teams of modern Western politics that will never see men's issues as a priority, while MRAs, on the other hand, bend over backwards and accept all manner of gynocentrism and bullshit under the guise of playing politics or, quote, choosing the lesser evil just so some politician can maybe get to us after gun rights and immigration and abortion and healthcare get sorted out, which, by the way, is exactly never. So there are, to be clear, a lot of MGTOW that don't think that MGTOW is the only way to go. Otherwise, we would never speak on politics in general. But we do know as MGTOW some ways that lead to dead ends. And begging politicians to shrink government for us, or arguing with feminists that are already committed to their worldview and are never going to change, is a dead fucking end. And yes, most MGTOW aren't interested in going down that road, and we're not signing on to that fool's errand. You say that activism on a personal level gives men hope for restoring fatherhood and the nuclear family, etc. Well, whatever. If that's what you wish to pursue, then pursue it. And of course, MGTOW aren't explicitly against doing any of these things. They just have 2 eyes and 2 ears and can read and write and operate off of results. The men's rights movement has had, 3-4 decades to progress? And men look around and they see that VAWA isn't going away. They see that selective service isn't going away. Men are still getting shafted in divorce courts. They're still treated as primary aggressors. 3 decades in, feminism was making huge strides, massive strides. And the MRM, frankly, is not. This tells us a few things. That is that being right and having the truth on your side doesn't count for a damn thing in Western politics, and since feminism does not have the truth on its side, it must have something else working in its favor. MGTOW have determined that something else to be our society is in fact gynocentric and ready and willing to pander to the female at the expense of men. And this is why on the governmental level, men earn the majority of taxes and women receive the majority of benefits. And this is why on the interpersonal level, men earn the vast majority of money and women spend the vast majority of it. And MGTOW see this and they draw the conclusion that a shift in social norms must come before any significant political change can ever be a reality, and as such do not view men engaging in gaining political resource to have much of a chance until that occurs. Furthermore, for MRAs like yourself that want to, quote, restore the nuclear family, whatever that means, approaching that goal from a strictly political mindset shows that you don't understand that technological advances like female birth control had a huge part in the unraveling of the traditional nuclear family and fatherhood, right? Abortion, the pill, these things which gave women access to unburdened pregnancy and non-consequential sex is a major factor in all of this, and political activism is never going to change that reality. So, although we don't care if men's rights activists try, and we'll even give them suggestions from time to time, we're not getting our hopes up for some political Hail Mary you MRAs want to embark on. And frankly, the only time we even clash with these kind of MRAs is when they attempt to portray this as a more valid form of pro-male behavior in comparison to going your own way, when in fact, engaging in a very likely futile political endeavor is by definition worse than doing nothing, since you're not accomplishing anything and still expending energy. Now, MGTOW, being a phenomenon much more based in grassroots decentralization, has an organic, unconscious effect of depriving the state of tax revenue and increasing the economic station of individual men. It is activism. It's free energy activism. It requires no effort from MGTOW other than a healthy sense of self-interest and self-preservation. Right? So MRAs can do what they wish. But again, 3 to 4 decades in, feminism, unlike the men's rights movement, was making huge strides, and it wasn't because the cultural Marxist Jews or Illuminati or communism made it so. It's because men give women whatever they want. And people like you call anyone who points that out generalizing misogynist. And you idiots, MRAs such as yourself, are part of the problem and likely even worse of a handicap on male sovereignty than any feminist has ever been. And frankly, the fact that we have to, this late in the game, explain the WALT to MRAs and why it's used shows that they're either dishonest or incompetent or both. You say that we rely too heavily on an explanation of technology to explain away the problems of feminism and the divorce rate. I say it can be objectively shown that feminism could have existed if communism never did. Feminism could have existed if Karl Marx was never born and never penned his manifesto. Feminism could not have existed if birth control for women never existed. Feminism could not have existed without the advent of safe on-demand abortion. Feminism could not have existed without the Industrial Revolution and inventions that alleviated female labor in the home. If those weren't invented, feminism could not have existed. That's why you can't show me any of the developing nations that haven't fully industrialized yet that harbor a robust feminist movement. Show me even one. In fact, I'm going to demonstrate this argument and how it works with the following example. Now, if an intelligent MRA is given the option of choosing to immediately strike down all divorce laws, effectively putting an end, at least temporarily so, to alimony and child support overnight, or making safe, reversible male birth control ubiquitous overnight, which one should he choose? Clearly, the laws can always be changed back. Divorce laws can disappear and be brought back. So long as marriage exists, divorce laws or cultural norms dictating the dissolution of marriage probably will also. Birth control, however, can never be put back in its box after it becomes ubiquitous. After men have had a taste of the power that the emergent technology of male birth control offers them, they'll do damn near anything to get it and keep it. And this is also why women, for example, were willing to risk their lives for illegal abortions. What they were really risking their lives for was the chance to control when and where they reproduce, because they knew the power that came along with that. You see, technology is ahead of political legislations by at least a decade, pretty much perpetually. Technology holds infinite potential. Legislation holds limited potential, right? We've banned slavery. We've instituted prohibition. In 1,000 years, that might change. We might legalize it again. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying this may happen. But absent some, dark age where we actually regress technologically, female birth control is never going to be unavailable to women. And the same is going to apply to men when they get theirs. Now, you say, Stone, that MGTOW rely heavily on gynocentrism, and again, make the accusation that gynocentrism is the manosphere analog of patriarchy theory, and say that it is undefinable and thus unfalsifiable. Well, I'll define it right here for you. I define gynocentrism as the human species' biological tendency to put the needs and wants of its females at the center of their social structures and societies and institutions. So with that definition in mind, you claim it to be unfalsifiable, but you neglect to mention that there exists a good deal of science to back up gynocentrism. There exist scientific studies to show that women do in fact have an in-group gender bias. That'll be in the description box. There exist political polls that show that the biggest determining factor in whether or not a woman votes conservatively or liberally is whether or not she has a husband. That'll be in the description box. There exist studies to show that newborn infants are given more attention and consolation by mothers if they're a girl instead of a boy. That'll be in the description box.
See, razor blade candy has brought up in the past
that there's no laws that state that women must receive less time for their crimes in comparison to men who have committed the same crimes, and yet they do. Look at that. No legal discriminations enshrined into law, and yet magically women receive less harsh punishments. I guess the Marxists did that too. Now, you say that the only consequences that are worth changing are the ones that we can easily influence and that we can't change our biology, and yet political analysts and statisticians and advertising agencies and big data analysts can predict which states will vote for which political candidate with a high degree of certainty, down even to the counties in the individual state. Advertising agencies can tell you what women are going to buy and why they're going to buy it, because they are employed to analyze the differences between men and women based in biology in hopes of using it, and rather successfully, I might add, to the tune of billions of dollars to extract money from female consumers. Now, you're saying that we can't change biology, so we should just focus on culture is, I'm assuming, an implied statement suggestive of focusing on political solutions in regards to feminism, which begs the question, are you, Stone, under the impression that politicians who pass the laws that you're begging them to change aren't doing the same thing? That politicians aren't researching biological realities between gender in order to capitalize on a gender's vote? That's ridiculous. You want us to believe that biology and politics are distinct spheres of influence within the human species? They are not. Biology most certainly does play a factor in voting and will continue to do so. And in terms of differences between left and right, no. In terms of issues that face men and boys, neither of them give a damn, and neither of them will directly address the issues we face. The conservatives, at best, are portrayed by many MRAs as wanting to get the government out of our lives. Thus, they offer at most some trickle-down residual benefit men and boys might receive from Republican politicians, so long as we basically put all our eggs in that basket and just hope for the best, while at the same time taking on all of the negative associations that come with aligning yourself with conservative Western politics, or liberal politics for that matter. And here's what some of the main contenders, right, these Republicans or conservatives who are either running for the conservative presidential nomination or have earned it, have to say about some of the issues that affect men. Here's the darling, the front runner for get the government out of our lives, at least now since that Ron Paul isn't running anymore. Here's Rand Paul.
One of the workplace laws and rules that I think are good is that bosses shouldn't prey on young interns in their office. And I think really the media seems to have given President Clinton a pass on this. He took advantage of a girl that was 20 years old and an intern in his office. There is no excuse for that, and that is predatory behavior, and it should be something we shouldn't want to associate with people who would take advantage of a young girl in his office. This isn't having an affair. I mean, this isn't me saying, oh, he's had an affair, we shouldn't talk to him. Someone who takes advantage of a young girl in their office, I mean, really. And then they have the gall to stand up and say Republicans are having a war on women. So, yes, I think it's a factor. Now, it's not Hillary's fault.
And here's John McCain, somebody who has earned the presidential conservative nomination.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And obviously we are here today to determine how the Department of Defense can most effectively reduce instances of sexual assault and ensure that offenders are held accountable. Our witnesses have characterized the problem as a crisis and a cancer that threatens the very fabric of our military, and I couldn't agree more. At its core, this is an issue of defending basic human rights, but it's also a long-term threat to the strength of our military, and we have to ask ourselves, if left uncorrected, what impact will this problem have on recruitment and retention of qualified men and women? Just last night, a woman came to me and said her daughter wanted to join in the military, and could I give my unqualified support for her doing so? I could not. I cannot overstate my disgust and disappointment over the continued reports of sexual misconduct in our military. We've been talking about the issue for years, and talk is insufficient.
So yeah, these guys certainly sound like men's rights is the first thing on their agenda, don't they? You see, there most certainly are, again, differences between the right and left, but let's ask ourselves, how did we reach that conclusion exactly? How do MRAs like Stone reach that conclusion? What is the right and what is the left? Well, they are two political groups that, when taken together, comprise the vast majority of voters in the United States and in the Western world as well. So, in admitting that the left is different than the right and vice versa, you have just generalized hundreds of millions of people, hundreds of millions of Americans, if we take American politics as the example, as belonging to a group with which you have decided to, without taking the time to pursue the impossible task of defining the innumerable variants of political worldviews that millions of these people you've grouped into the left or the right share.
you've generalized these peoples as members of the political left, right? And why have you done this? Well, because you're willing to unfairly generalize some exceptions to your definitions of a, quote, leftist in hopes of securing a general pattern of behavior of this generalized group that you've labeled the left. Now, you know not everyone you've labeled a leftist is your exact definition of it, yet you label them anyway. You've generalized out of necessity. You would tell leftists that them saying that nulalt, that not all leftists are like that, doesn't invalidate your view of leftism, and you'd be right. And the same thing could apply to the political right. And yet, MRAs like yourself, Stone, have a problem when this same methodology is used to analyze women. Are women some special class above scrutiny that when we analyze them, we magically should be required to put aside the assessment of general behavior that is a fundamental part of how we develop logic and reason based on the environment around us? So again, there are cosmetic differences between the right and left, and even some more than cosmetic ones. But the question that we should ask ourselves is not whether or not there are differences between the right and left, but whether or not the way the right and left approach men's issues are in any significant way approaches that can be non-trivially beneficial to men, and whether or not gynocentrism has influence over politics. But again, gynocentrism isn't real to you types, I forgot. And of course, since gynocentrism doesn't exist, we now lack an ability to understand famous videos like the "How Can She Slap" video. Right? This is a video that shows a woman slapping a man on some Indian game show. And the man then slaps her back. And immediately, white knights rush to her rescue and begin beating the man to the point that he can be heard crying in pain in the background. So essentially, this is men acting before they even have time to think about it in defense of a female violent aggressor who in front of their faces was initially violent to a man. And when the man defends himself, they attack the man. Not in the West. Not in America, where these people generally claim that cultural Marxism is taking its toll, but in India. I guess the cultural Marxists conditioned this into existence. I guess they made these men behave like rutting apes and assault the male victim of assault here. I guess the cultural Marxists did that too. Wrong. Wrong. What this is human autopilot. Right? This is men defending women even against their own interests. This is the biological trend of our species. This is in-group preference in the form of gynocentrism, unlike patriarchy theory, again, has its basis in scientific study. Now go ahead and watch the now famous Dateline social experiment clip, which had a man abusing a woman, and both men and women rushing to her aid, when after reversing the experiment, with the woman abusing a man, an off-duty cop, a person charged by our society and accepted by our society as trained in being able to protect and serve all people regardless of distinctions, including gender, walks right by an assault in progress and laughs because it's a man being hit by a woman. That's gynocentrism. And these are examples of gynocentrism in a time where prestigious academic officials can be fired, terminated from employment for even daring to suggest that there are innate differences between men and women, as we saw with the president of Harvard University, Larry Subners, that got fired for saying just that. Meaning that any inquiry into gynocentrism our society has currently undertaken up until this point has been in fact hampered by our society's inability to ever portray women in a negative light, as we saw in the Harvard University fiasco, which simultaneously renders a poorer understanding of gynocentrism while at the same time reinforcing it as well. And on top of this, MRAs such as yourself, Stone, are afraid to talk about it even in the manosphere, to the point where women in the manosphere are allowed to censor, via banning, the opinions of men who identify as MGTOW on websites claiming to be pro-MGTOW. So in analyzing the differences between gynocentrism and cultural Marxism in comparison to something like patriarchy theory, the differences, in my opinion, between patriarchy theory and cultural Marxist theory are actually much closer to each other than patriarchy and gynocentrism are. Again, patriarchy theory implies that there is some group of men with nefarious intentions shaping the world that most men actively participate in hopes of oppressing women from opportunity, and that a perpetual political struggle is necessary to beat back some great evil patriarchy. That is feminism. And this is why the famous "Smash the Patriarchy Feminist" meme is reflected in the largest anti-cultural Marxism community I can find. That is the aptly titled Smash Cultural Marxism community. And communities such as this, they share the same kind of oppositional, dichotomy-based, elite-based conspiracy theory thought process that feminism does. right? They perceive themselves, this smash cultural Marxist, the cultural Marxist types, they perceive themselves as victims of a vast leftist agenda in order to emulate the victimology of the left. And so this is going to be a bit off topic, but it's relatable to what we're talking about here. This is why they see things, these communities, the cultural Marxist types, like, for example, interracial dating, as in the case of white supremacists, as some vast genocide against the white race. And when you confront them on this, they of course give you the dictionary definition of genocide to include the fact that there's some epidemic of, according to them, epidemic of interracial dating designed to erase European genetics underway, right? And they use that word genocide, they use that textbook definition in order to justify the use of a word as strong as genocide, while knowing that they're using it for effect in order to induce the definition of genocide that everybody thinks of when they hear the word, which of course includes murder and ethnic cleansing. It has nothing to do with people of two different races reproducing with each other. So these cultural Marxist types, they operate just like the left with that same victimology and the control of language and nuance to aggress against others while portraying themselves as victims. It's a lot like how feminists use feminism for all sorts of overtly anti-male behavior, and then, like victims, point back to the dictionary definition of feminism to say, well, all we really want is equality between men and women. And in the same vein, these cultural Marxist conspiracist types hatch some Jew plot that explains away interracial dating, because you see, the blame can never lie on white women, for example. White women, of course, had nothing to do with this new form of gynocentrism, that is feminism, that traded the male provider for the state. No. White women didn't abandon you en masse. It was the evil Jew. Men, Jewish men. The evil Jew did it to you. And for black supremacists, it's the evil white man that ruined your little Nefertiti, right? Now you can't pretend you're Ramesses the Great because your woman would rather collect welfare than to be with you, so you blame the white man. Oh, so sorry. So sorry. Now, the recent growth of MGTOW has had the side effect for those of us that have MGTOW as a Google alert. And if you don't have it, I suggest you place it as a Google alert, and you'll see the same thing I'm talking about. It has a side effect of alerting MGTOW such as myself to when the recent popularity and surge of MGTOW breaks into an unrelated online community, right? So within weeks of each other, I happen to receive two separate unrelated MGTOW alerts coming from both white nationalist and black nationalist sites, particularly on the subject of this new breed of man calling themselves MGTOW, and they've had some fairly interesting things to say about us. Now, we're going to start here with the white nationalists. Here's a Google alert from the biggest white nationalist community in the world, possibly. That is stormfront.com. And this is going to be in the description box. And so these people have happened upon men going their own way and have started a forum post about it. And listen to what they say. Men going their own way. Is this just masculinism for men like feminism was for women? I think I smell a Jew. MGTOW is anti-white. It encourages white men to go after non-white women. Now, you'd be hard-pressed to find any MGTOW, definitely not any prominent MGTOW, but even really any MGTOW, telling other men which race of women they should or shouldn't date. And certainly, we don't tell white men to avoid white women. I couldn't care less what race of woman some MGTOW is fucking, but that gives you a bit of insight into the batshit paranoia that what I like to call elite theorists can gin up when left to their own echo chambers. And again, I'm referring to people that subscribe to this all or nothing hidden hand. It was all just XYZ elites, whether it be Jews or cultural Marxists or capitalism or communism or what have you. I mean, to the contrary, if anything, from what I've heard from white MGTOW, white women are doing a pretty good job of repelling white men all on their own. No conspiracies necessary. But you see, this led me to another article with some very interesting language in it. And I just think it's amazing the uniformity you find when women make their way into these online communities, even if they aren't MGTOW. All that's really required is that they have to be predominantly men. It doesn't have to have anything to do with MGTOW at all. Take, for example, this article, right? This is a white nationalist article. And it's called, Why White Women Reject White Nationalism. This ought to be good. Luckily, unlike the white nationalists, MGTOWs don't need women to further their agenda. The white nationalists, wishing, of course, to perpetuate the European race, do in fact have to depend on women, which puts them, at least to some degree, at the behest of women. But I'll read you the relevant bits and pieces here and insert commentary where appropriate. And the article starts out, quote, "Lately I have been hearing the same stories from racially conscious women about the white nationalist movement. They value their race and are eager to participate and do their part to secure the existence of our people and future for white children, but they are alienated and disillusioned by some of the, quote, wounded soldier type rhetoric that they see at white nationalist conferences and on the internet." Well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? You see, women can't stand to hear negativity, even if the reality of this situation reflects it, and any men that voice a reality that reflects negativity must be ostracized, even if they put forth an accurate assessment of reality. And this is why they hate MGTOW. Now, I'm not saying that white nationalists do put this forth. I'm just saying, if they hear negativity, these men must go. It continues on and says, "Before I'm accused of picking a fight, I want to emphasize here, lots of white nationalists, like James Edwards and Richard Spencer, are happily married. I also couldn't be happier with my own relationship. In spite of this, there is still a very loud group of these, quote, wounded soldiers out there. Think of Lieutenant Dan and Forrest Gump, who have had bad experiences with American women in general, and it is a problem attracting and keeping women involved in the movement." So, here we see the acceptance of the proper man, right? The men that have submitted to the bondage of a Western marriage contract. Unlike these wounded soldiers, I love that, wounded soldier types who, predictably, according to her, just haven't found the right woman. How familiar. And the best part is that she then goes on to read a list of everything wrong with these wounded soldier types in the white nationalist movement, and it really is remarkably similar to how women that are trying to infiltrate MGTOW and the men's rights movement as a whole talk. It's really almost identical. She says, quote, "Why aren't more women involved with the white nationalist movement? There's a conversation going on about this in the comments. It is such an interesting topic that it warrants a separate thread. Everyone who has attended a white nationalist conference has noticed that men are drastically overrepresented. Why is that?" she says. And then she gives a list of deal breakers that repel women from these movements. So she says, deal breaker number 1. Because they are offended by the people who rail against white women on account of their bad experiences with dating and marriage, right? They shouldn't have dated women like that anyway, but take out their sexual frustrations on all women with untenable generalizations. I love it. I mean, it's almost identical. Why didn't you just choose better? You should be able to identify sociopathic women. It's not like women hide their true intentions before marriage or anything like that. Deal breaker number 3. Because of the aura of negativity that surrounds the white nationalist movement. Most women can't stand a constant drumbeat of negativity and self-consciously avoid demoralizing websites. Oh, the poor dears. So, as I've said, women need everything to be happy. Women need superfluous decorations and trinkets to make them feel happy and feel safe. They're not interested in reality, or at least an exploration into it. Now, am I saying that white nationalists are a suitable reflection of reality? No, not to me. But they are attempting to define a reality that to them isn't always prim and proper and roses and candy. And surprise, surprise, women don't like to hear all that. And soon enough, the white knights in their communities will start ostracizing the ones that disrupt the delicate sensibilities of their white queens and call them radicals or whatever other term they wish to use. And it'll happen in exactly the same way that it has in the men's rights movement, by the way. Deal breaker number 4. Because white nationalism attracts a disproportionate number of geeky, socially awkward males who have Asperger's syndrome or who are creepy in some way, as well as homosexual misogynists who are on the warpath against women. So, basically, you can't get laid, you must be gay, you have Asperger's, etc. The same cookie-cutter insults that make me wonder whether or not women are manufactured in some warehouse somewhere. Deal breaker number 5. Because there is a lot of crossover between the men's rights community and white nationalism, and this is a turnoff to women who are culturally conservative and therefore more likely to be Christians. Aw, darlings. Now, who knows? Maybe some white nationalist-minded MGTOWs have made their way onto these forums, and the Christian, conservative, racist white women are afraid that their men might actually make them get off their lazy asses and work for a living. So this disproves that, again, it's only feminism, or it's only the left, that are against men's rights. Because, of course, are these women feminists? Are these women leftists? No, they're probably hardcore Christian conservative tradcons. Deal breaker number 6, because the vast majority of women who qualify as, quote, traditional, right? So this isn't MGTOW using this traditionalist, right? In quotes, even in this article. This is conservative white women that are using this, right? So because the vast majority of women who qualify as, quote, traditional in America are strongly Christian or religious in some way. Sounds pretty feminist to me, right? They are turned off to white nationalism because of atheism and misogyny and lewd discussions about women on white nationalist websites. Anyone who goes to church knows that there are far more, quote, traditional women than men in America, right? There's that traditional in quotes again. I thought that was just a slur that MGTOW just made up out of nowhere, right? It is fashionable in some circles to save yourself for marriage, whereas few men think that way these days. A respectable woman is not going to be dressed like a slut in some bar or club on the weekend. Of course, there are plenty of, quote, respectable traditionalist women that screwed men in divorce, but she doesn't want you to know that. And of course, there's nothing mentioned about how women have feminized the church to make it hostile to men, but that's really a whole nother video. Now on top of this, men, of course, are more likely to believe that they don't need some church to commune with their God if they're religious. In fact, it's women that need some comfortable, gilded church to sit down. And it's men that, for example, can go into the woods, surround themselves in nature, and just commune with nature, right? If they're atheists, or commune with their gods, or God in nature if they're religious. And again, it's a whole nother topic that we can get to at any time. Maybe I'll do a video separately on this topic alone. But women really enforce men into attending church. And of course, men are the gatekeepers of wealth, just like women are the gatekeepers of sex. And you got to keep the tithes flowing, right? You got to get men to tithe. What better way to do it than to leverage women to get them to part with their wealth? It's essentially the same exact thing that the state does. It's just the religious institutions are doing it. It's a hustle, gentlemen. It's a hustle. Deal breaker number 7. Because women will always be less interested in politics than men. White nationalism focuses heavily on politics and science and less on culture, family, and religion, which are subjects which attract more conservative women. Deal breaker number 8. Because women are more empathetic and are natural conciliators and thus mix like oil and water with the curmudgeons who are drastically overrepresented among white nationalists. So here it is, gentlemen, the golden uterus syndrome that infects communities like this. Racial nationalists, both black and white, worship their women, and thus they buy into the women are better nurturers and women civilize men by virtue of their gender, which confers onto them the status of goddess in these communities. And frankly, it isn't secluded to just white nationalist communities. And this is where I want to bring up this black nationalist Tumblr post that also showed up in my MGTOW Google alerts. Right? And this is a Tumblr post that was titled, "If you look at feminism and MGTOW and the opposing theories and the blame game they play, you can come to the conclusion that white males and females genuinely do not like each other. What's so dangerous about black males and females adopting these ideologies is that it places us in this oppositional dichotomy. Instead of us working together appositionally or side by side, we are now targeting each other while trying to fight white supremacy. Black men and women have been engaged in a manufactured gender war that has nothing to do with our history, and what's really happening is white supremacy conducting warfare on black people on multiple levels, psychologically, overtly, and chemically." And then later on in the post it says, "Feminism and now MGTOW are two ideologies that allow white elites to wage proxy warfare on the black community." So what you're seeing here is the fact that some black communities still haven't figured out that the bitch slap that they received from the fervency and speed with which black women also hopped onto the feminist bandwagon, they haven't figured out that that was due to biological forces that apply cross-culturally and cross-racially in all communities. They still haven't figured out why women took to this so rapidly and so naturally. And so the conclusion that these white nationalists and black nationalist communities are reaching is that it is now MGTOW, right? Look at this. Look at the power we have, gentlemen. Supposedly, we are so powerful and so widespread to these people that we are responsible for a conspiracy against the white family and the black family. Now, that's impressive. Now, what we see here is exactly the type of thing that I'm talking about. We see A,
the blaming of an outside force, in this case white supremacy, or the evil Jews for engineering the separation of the genders. And we see B, an appeal to the men and women have a special bond and are in their natural state working in harmony with each other meme, the gynocentric religion, and the special love bond soulmate nonsense. And this, gentlemen, is just a reflection of men's fear, right? Their fear of confronting what they know deep down about women. And this is why they build these elaborate conspiracies to hide what they already know. It's the same thing in the men's rights community. It's A, the blaming of an outside force. In the men's rights community, instead of the Jews or white supremacy, it's cultural Marxism or feminism. And B, an appeal to the special bond between men and women that the Marxist and the feminist or whatever group have corrupted and deceived women into accepting. You know, in fact, it's interesting. These cultural Marxist conspiracy types have built in, a lot like the feminists do, a perpetual prosecution victimhood complex. It's built in right into their ideology. This is why, for example, they support things or enshrine Robert Conquest's second law of politics into their philosophy, which states that any organization, get this, any organization not explicitly right-wing sooner or later becomes left-wing. And under this mantra, they've then organized themselves into discrete political packets, unwittingly, on a spectrum of political rightedness, in which each community furthest from the left can then look at the next discrete community one level closer to the left wing and subject them to their standards of right wing in order to enforce increasingly batshit crazy purity testing. And this process is perpetual. These people, the cultural Marxist conspiracy theorists, since they don't even really believe their own horseshit, have to be consistently proving their purity to one another, all while hijacking other communities to cannibalize. And what happened was a lot of them saw MGTOW as a community that they could insert into their fold, right? Turn us into evangelists for their Marxism destroyed the nuclear family and ruined women for us forever and ever, amen bullshit. They wanted to insinuate that into MGTOW. And then when they, who are constantly and perpetually running their ideological purity tests on each other, saw that MGTOW had the gall to put even one conditional clause on the identity of MGTOW, the conditional clause of the rejection of a patently gynocentric institution that is marriage, when they saw that we were making our own identity, and that identity ran counter to this bullshit about cultural Marxism ruining women forever and ever, they flipped their shit, and they're mad because they put so much effort into their attempt to bring MGTOW into their conspiracist whack jobbery, and we still haven't fallen for it. No, I'm going to say it definitively. Cultural Marxism did not definitively cause feminism. Now, to be fair, there are some proponents of putting forth this conspiracy theory that seem to be reasonable, and that even though they believe that cultural Marxism is the main driver of feminism, are willing to at least concede the possibility of organic forces being the actual drivers of feminism. And in order to illustrate this, I'll read you an excerpt from Angry Harry's article of Manosphere fame, titled Cultural Marxism and Feminism. And I'm just going to read to you a bit, choice bits from this article. And he starts out by saying, many people often study the academic trails and the documentation from the past, and they join up all the dots between then and now. From this, they often conclude that since what was argued for in the past has now actually happened, then some kind of conspiracy must have taken place in order to make it happen. After all, behind the scenes, there were all these academics and activists beavering away over the years, aiming to achieve certain things, and lo and behold, these things actually did happen. And as such, it was probably all planned. And this does indeed sound like a conspiracy. And in many ways, it is. After all, when people act together to achieve certain aims, then the word conspiracy seems to describe quite well what they're doing. But my own view is that while it is true that people are always conspiring with each other to do things, it does not necessarily follow that a successful outcome is something that they planned. As an example, many men's rights activists are currently conspiring with each other to defeat feminism. And in a few years' time, with any luck, feminism will be defeated. And some future academics might then look back and plot the links between MRA activity and the demise of feminism and say, aha! This was all planned by the MRAs. What remarkably clever fellows they were. But of course, the truth of the matter would more likely be that MRA activity simply helped to bring about certain perturbations within the cultural system that quite simply, alongside a huge number of other factors that mostly arose from elsewhere, led to one thing and then another and then another. As such, to suggest that the demise of feminism was actually planned by MRAs who sneakily conspired to bring about this result would surely be rather overstating their role in the whole process. And yet, of course, they did conspire to bring about such a result. The point that I'm trying to make is that cultural Marxists did indeed conspire to bring about much of what has been brought about. But the idea that they planned things to happen in the way that they happened is probably exaggerating the extent of their capabilities. As my regular readers know, I tend to see large forces as the products of fairly intangible but huge organisms that are essentially made up of lesser beings who are simply doing their own things and serving their own purposes, often completely unaware of the myriad of forces they are helping to procure and energize. And then he says the success of cultural Marxism has much more to do with the fact that millions of people stood to benefit from it. And I'll stop it there, but again, feel free to read the entire article. And he does, in fact, disagree with me that cultural Marxism isn't a major cause of feminism. And he goes on to list that in his article. But I just think that it's brilliant and really shows Angry Harry's ability to entertain notions that disagree with his current assessment of things. And I think he should be commended for that. So here we see a much more reasonable confluence of organic interest being proposed to explain feminism. And again, in the rest of the article, he actually goes on to validate the idea of an overarching political conspiracy, well-funded and multinational, to subvert Western institutions via cultural Marxism. But he does concede that just because there exists proof of conspirators, this is the extremely important part, just because there exists proof of conspirators, this does not necessarily translate to a successful conspiracy. And then the question one has to ask oneself is, how long can a conspiracy like this, the conspiracy of cultural Marxism being the main driver of feminism, be sustained by active conspirators? Now, one of the main conspirators that Angry Harry mentioned was Russia during the Cold War. The Soviet Union, of course, collapsed over 2.5 decades ago, and feminism has continued unabated. And those that argue that all this has been the result of a conspiracy the whole time will say that after the fall of the Soviet Union, others took up where they left off, and they might even be correct that there were in fact more conspirators, but conspiracies, or at least active conspiracies, become more difficult to entertain or validate as the pool of conspirators grows. And even with relatively small conspiracy theories, not anything even approaching the size of a multinational cultural Marxist conspiracy. Let's take the popular conspiracy of 9/11 being an inside job. This conspiracy is made increasingly unlikely when you confront the fact that entire demolition crews would have had to work in secret to precisely rig a modern skyscraper for detonation and demolition without alerting the workers in the Twin Towers to their presence. So even at the scale of a few hundred conspirators, the conspiracy starts to break down. Because loose lips sink ships, gentlemen. The Mongols were rumored to have killed every single person who took part in the burial of Genghis Khan. The Manhattan Project, easily one of the most clandestine endeavors man has ever undertaken, had, according to declassified documents released this year, from 1943 to 1945, 1,500 leaks, 200 acts of sabotage, and 100 confirmed cases of espionage. So that's 1,500 leaks in an operation whose goal was the manufacture of weapons that can put an end to all life on Earth. And that's significant, because it shows that the potential end of our species still is no match, it seems, for our capacity to gossip. And so one draws the conclusion that such a widespread conspiracy, the conspiracy of cultural Marxism, which according to its proponents has infected academia on a massive scale, politics on a massive scale, and a myriad of other cultural and economic institutions of the West, they assume that these people perpetuating this conspiracy are what, just doing it all in secret? Right? That this conspiracy isn't subject to the forces of human biology and human nature? That these people have been avoiding exposure for the better part of half a century? This is ridiculous. A conspiracy this massive that didn't have to depend on and take advantage of innate biological forces that govern the human animal would need a lot more than some obscure political fad or, Fabian socialists or whatever to sustain it. And if you agree with this, then you must agree that there is something to feminism that is not conspired, but that instead perpetuates itself. And what people like Karl Marx achieved is not the massive infiltration of Western culture and academics and politics that conspiracists give him credit for, but merely a deciphering of human victimology and tribalism. It is natural, gentlemen. Human beings, especially in capitalist systems of competition, which I acknowledge to be the most preferable economic system our species has devised. I guess I could correct myself. I would probably lean more towards a mixed market, but that's a time for another video, and I'll probably address that in upcoming videos. But human beings that can't compete for resources or outcompete others in these capitalist systems will gravitate towards socialism as a means of attaining resources. It's a simple survival strategy. Human beings that can outcompete others will gravitate towards capitalism. And the confluence of these particular demographics, these particular types of people, results in the balance between socialism and capitalism that every modern Western civilization walks. What Karl Marx did was to provide an identity for those that would naturally gravitate towards socialist measures to obtain resources to wrap themselves around. Karl Marx's works allowed for a tribe of the socialist-minded to coalesce, but it didn't. I repeat, it did not and was not the genesis of the socialist-minded. It was simply a banner they could join to organize against the producers of society. And I'd even go as far as to argue that the stereotypical social justice warrior, the American latte-sipping, hates racism but lives in a gated community with nothing but white folks because he's secretly racist himself. These people, right, that guy and that girl, I'd go as far as to say that these people are products of capitalism. These people cannot or could not exist without the massive amount of wealth that capitalism generates, right? It's an unfortunate side effect of capitalism, but a very real one. These people are incapable of competition and of innovation, and this forms the basis for a lot of these career victims. This is how they eat. This is how they sustain themselves. It's the hidden burden of successful capitalism nobody wants to talk about. And women, given the fact that evolutionary forces have imbued them with a decreased ability to compete in cutthroat capitalist environments, are also a derivative of the social justice warrior capitalist dependents, if you want to call them that. They are also a burdensome byproduct of the wealth that capitalism generates, and arguably, given their sexual appeal, a significant driver of it. The tricky part in all of this is that it's hard for us human beings to separate our analysis of ourselves as a species from our individual emotions, but when you're able to do so, it becomes immediately clear what the parameters we're working under are. We can define things under the filter of cultural Marxism, or socialism, or capitalism, or feminism, and all of these will in fact provide you with an incomplete analysis of the human ecosystem. When we do away with all of these isms, what we're left with is an analysis of the ecology of a relatively intelligent, hairless ape on a ball of rock. Nature naturally looks for equilibrium, and capitalism functions within this equilibrium. And feminism also functions within this equilibrium. So again, if you toss aside these isms, what you're left with is a hairless ape on a celestial rock simply interacting with our environment. We don't explain human ecology with a cultural Marxism conspiracy. We explain a component that contributes in the aggregate to the equilibrium that makes up the fugue of human ecology. So if you want a total understanding, or if you at least want to approach a total understanding, you have to understand the dynamics of human behavior above and beyond these isms, these limited, temporary, passing through history to the point where one day they won't even be mentioned or remembered, even in any textbook or information storage system that we've developed. All of these things that are going on today can be explained by human biology, human behavior, human nature. And when these phrases, these isms pass away, that is all that will remain. You see, the cultural Marxism theory, the conspiracy theory that these people parrot, I always knew it, was a convenient lie, and I didn't really know how to articulate until I saw one of Stardust's more recent videos on social justice warriors, and I think I'll include that in the description as well. And how he mentioned that these social justice warriors love to blame a directed, controlled, and purposefully guided society for plotting to oppress them. And it's on this foundation of victimhood and oppression, it is there that they build their megacity of woe is me, woe is me. And then they sit there and they complain and complain and complain that if it wasn't for the racist patriarchy capitalist, we would all band together and usher in world peace immediately and all that. And these cultural Marxist conspiracists do exactly the same thing in the opposite direction. They, just like the social justice warriors they hate, say that society was and still is controlled and guided and directed, and instead of the patriarchy, for them is directed by cultural Marxism, communism, leftists, and much like the leftists who wish, if they could, just get rid of capitalism and patriarchy and whatever else they used to hide their own mediocrity and utopian delusion, just like the leftists who think that eliminating these things will magically get rid of things like tribalism or racism or sexism, these cultural Marxist conspiracists also force the world through the filter of this right-left dichotomy and use it to hide the fact that if we got rid of, quote, cultural Marxism tomorrow, women won't turn into unicorns, traditionalism won't come back, and your God, the nuclear family, won't rise up from the dead and fix your broken, torn apart families. It was women who chose to divorce. It was women who chose to support the child support racket. Charles Manson, for example, didn't kill a soul. He manipulated other people, mostly women, into doing it for him. And do you know what we did to these women? In a legal system that we consider to be just, we put them in jail. We didn't say, ooh, the big bad monster Charles Manson made them do it. No, they did it. Meaning, even if someone is manipulated into doing something, they still have a choice of whether or not they want to stab someone. And the women of Western civilization, even if you could prove definitively the highly unlikely assertion that they were all just manipulated into divorcing and using child support rackets and the state as a tool against men, so fucking what? They still did it. They're still responsible. So the question that needs to be asked about the efficacy or the current presence of cultural Marxism and to what degree it is responsible for the current problems men face can simply be answered by asking whether or not the problems that cultural Marxists identify will exist after the end of what they identify as cultural Marxism, or whether or not these problems have existed before the existence of cultural Marxism. If we can find similar behavior in the past or propose likely scenarios and believable scenarios in our future as a species, and we can still assume that certain behaviors that these conspiracies label as cultural Marxism will occur, then it follows that the cause of these behaviors are not cultural Marxism. And the scenario I propose, and I've talked about this before, is, for example, when the governments that we as human beings erect become interplanetary instead of international. If we assume that at this point, cultural Marxism is a phenomenon relegated to the pages of history, if, for example, at this point, we imagine a civil war between colonizers of the moon, Lunarians we'll call them, and Earthlings, took place in which, much like the American Revolution, the Lunarians won their independence from their mother country, or mother planet in this case, and let's say the vast stores of helium-3 deposited on the moon for eons provide these Lunarians with an almost inexhaustible supply of energy, spawning a golden age of Lunarian renaissance and technological development, while the Earth was forced to maintain its precarious dependency on fossil fuel. Would there be people who would label all Lunarians as an economically hostile class who uses its position of relative wealth in comparison to the Earthlings to subjugate and oppress them? Would the Earthlings develop ideas that label Lunarians as innate oppressors and the Earthlings as innate victims? And would there be people that ignore all of the great achievements that the Lunarians were able to accomplish and all the aid that they give to the Earthlings and the fact that they now benefit from protection from the Lunarian military just in case that militant Martian colony wants to attack Earth? That, gentlemen, would be Marxism, developing independent of Karl Marx. Or should I say, rather, that this would be an example of natural in-group bias that is innate to the human condition. This, gentlemen, is a scenario that could easily unfold if Karl Marx never had existed, right? And there would be schools and academic institutions on Earth teaching that Lunarians are inherent oppressors. Just like feminists have infected institutions of academia and said that men are inherent oppressors of women, because we naturally do better than them in capitalist systems which generate the largest amount of wealth. So remember, gentlemen, that if feminism is a result of things such as cultural Marxism or leftism or what have you, then we'd have to ask ourselves why there was a middleman, or should I say a middle woman, involved. According to these people, set up women as a victim class and men as the oppressor class, and various methods by which resources could then be extracted from the oppressing class to the oppressed class were devised and instituted. So the state uses women as a means of extracting wealth from men, and in this scenario, there is a middleman, the female sex. So copious amounts of time and energy is being devoted toward courting female favor, at least politically speaking, in order to get them to part with the disposable income that men provide them. The same could not be said in reverse. You could not have gotten men to see themselves as being victims of women. You could not have gotten them to divorce en masse. You could not have gotten them to pursue laws which steal wealth and health and prosperity from women. So what I'm getting at here is that if these cultural Marxists did anything to influence or engineer society, they were aware of a few set parameters of society that were fixed, that they would have to work with and work around, because they know that female biology is fixed and liable to do one thing on the macro scale, and male biology is also fixed and liable to do other things, and any social engineering they wish to bring forth could not have been accomplished without a deep understanding of female and male nature and without a willingness to predict what should happen if you change this or that variable in society to men and women in a way that is necessarily dependent on making broad brush generalizations of both men and women. And interestingly enough, let's say I'm wrong and there actually is a leftist cultural Marxism conspiracy. They could only, this is the amazing part, that they could only have achieved it with understanding male and female biology. And here, the counter movement to these forces, whether you believe it's cultural Marxism or human nature or whatever, the counter movement is obsessed with not allowing men to explore these same fixed human parameters, especially in regards to the human female. If that's not dysfunction, I have no idea what is. I mean, this is the level of dysfunction that has insinuated itself into this movement. So again, what we're doing in essence, by proposing things like cultural Marxism as the main cause of feminism, is saying that something falls out of your hand because you let it go, when we know in fact that something falls out of your hand because gravity accelerates it down to Earth. There's really no way around the fact that if some sort of cultural Marxism conspiracy existed, it would need to work within the boundaries of fixed male and female nature to work, meaning male and female nature are what really needs to be examined and understood, even if cultural Marxism was a real conspiracy. And if no cultural Marxist plot has existed, then feminism arose because of male-female nature directly.
Now, the third element of MGTOW ideology is gynophobia and misogyny. Protecting men from women. Never trust a woman. Women are your enemy. Ideological MGTOWs promote the idea that men and women just can't get along, that there's just too much conflict, that the sexes are too incompatible and too different, that they just can't understand each other, and that women don't really care about men, that women just want to use men, destroy men, and discard men. Barbarossa and Stardust have been the most popular and influential ideological MGTOWs on YouTube for a number of years now. These people are far from fringe or extreme voices. They're about as mainstream as it gets. I could summarize Barbarossa's opinions and attitudes towards women, but I'd rather just let him speak for himself.
Many MRAs don't fully understand what the concept of gender war is all about and what it fully entails.
So tell me, Barbarossa, what does a gender war really entail?
Avoid relationships. Why would you step into a voluntary war and fraternize with the enemy? And yes, women are your enemy. I'm sick of pretending that women aren't the enemies of men just because most of them have been deceived into accepting feminism. I'm not buying that.
The bottom line is, never trust a woman. This is not the so-called misogyny that a feminist will easily find whenever someone challenges their propaganda. This is not the so-called misogyny which has been defined by Wikipedia as the objectification of women. This is the real thing. Some of the reasons that ideological MGTOWs give to justify their attitude towards women are female hypergamy, which boils down to the idea that women have unrealistic expectations and are never satisfied, and will eventually either ditch their man, cheat on their man, or try to change their man. Brifo's law, which is, where the female derives no benefit from the male, no association takes place. The assumption of female parasitism, in other words. Male disposability, the implication being that you are the only one who is actually taking a risk when you enter into a mutual partnership with a woman. Hypoagency, The idea that women refuse to be held responsible and accountable, and that automatically makes you, the male, the scapegoat in waiting. And gynocentrism. In other words, women might say they want equality, but in reality, they fully expect preferential treatment, and that comes along with female privilege and a female sense of entitlement. They also insist on framing problems as us versus them, where men are the us, women are the them, and where women exploit men. And they often insist that women should not be allowed into the men's rights movement, even though they don't support the men's rights movement to begin with, just because they don't trust women. Now I understand that many of these guys have been burned really bad, and scarred, and that they've been through the kinds of traumatic experiences that would drive a normal, sane man to commit suicide. I understand that, but I still don't share or promote their perspective, because I really don't think that this perspective is helping or enlightening anybody.
Now, in terms of gynophobia and misogyny, I want to say that at no point do MGTOW state that men and women are incapable of getting along or understanding each other. What I have personally said is that there always, so long as we depend on each other for sex and reproduction, there will always be this gender antagonism, this intraspecies gendered competition and mutual exploitation between men and women. And there exists phraseology that naturally arises in the human language to indicate that human beings intrinsically understand this on some level. These are phrases like, women, can't live with them, can't live without them. And, phrases like the battle of the sexes that naturally arise in our language and our lexicology to show that we understand this without ever having to talk about it directly. And my guess is that these figures of speech, these memes, arise as a means of expressing subconscious knowledge of the human condition. The subconscious expression is subconscious, of course, because men and women generally don't like confronting the reality that there exists this gendered antagonism between us. So we erect romance or soulmate culture. That is, more convenient lies to pretend it doesn't exist. And MRAs such as Stone, unfortunately, have committed themselves to an irreversible commitment to this romance culture. The men and women complement each other mimetic. And they devise increasingly silly and even downright corny catchphrases to reinforce this in their syntax and belief systems. Now, perhaps many of you remember when it was trendy to parrot this little MRA jingle. Feminism and women have nothing to do with each other. Women are a gender, feminism is an ideology. Wah, wah, wah. Now, remember that cornball cheesy period we went through? I remember it well. That was the period in time when the first inklings of an exodus away from the MRA portion of the manosphere to the radical new ideas MGTOW were putting forth began, and the reason it began is because men do not like being lied to. They don't like it when you bullshit them, and they don't like it when you ask them to suspend reality. They know, on an instinctual level, that women have a lot to do with feminism. They aren't stupid, and they don't like it when you insult their intelligence. And so when you, Stone, rattle on your little speech about, this is not misogyny, that radical feminists talk about, this is the real thing, that doesn't change the fakeness of it, Stone. That doesn't change the fact that you're using an accusation of misogyny in the same exact way feminists use it. It's fake, it's lame, and nobody's buying it. And it makes me wonder why MRAs such as yourself spend the lion's share of your time accusing other men of misogyny. Stone, you want to let us know when you're actually going to change a law, guy? You're a men's rights activist, right? You going to activate any rights for men anytime soon? Or are you going to look around for other men to bitch at until CNN calls you so you can spend an entire interview apologizing for misogyny, no matter how much you've already previously apologized for it? There's a reason, gentlemen, why MRAs do the vast amount of apology for misogyny within their ranks in comparison to really the entire rest of the manosphere. Observe that MGTOW have grown to rival the MRAs in numbers, and I believe will eventually surpass them. And observe also that we use much more inflammatory commentary, and yet MRAs, it was men's rights activists that were put on SPLC hate list groups, not MGTOWs. And this is because, and this is what I love about MGTOW, we operate under the radar, gentlemen. It's because we're a disjointed social organism that's grassroots and decentralized and unapologetic and wholly unapologetic. MRAs have been bitching about feminism for 30 years and nobody cares. Nobody's scared of them. They have no teeth. They have no political clout to wield. But when Breitbart posts articles on what the feminists refer to as failure to launch or Peter Pan syndrome, that is, men dropping out and keeping their money and wealth and health for themselves, that's when you see people start to panic. That's when these articles end up being the most commented and most popular articles in the history of these websites. Right? And it's funny how MRAs like Stone have been gunning to tone police so-called radical MGTOWs such as myself and Stardust out of their politically correct movement for so long. I find that funny, since of course they fail to realize that the decentralized nature of MGTOW makes it such that even if you could convince the thousands of people in the online MGTOW community to stop listening to me in hopes that they instead adopt the watered-down, diluted PC MGTOWs that the MRAs produce, that's just one MGTOW. That's just one. There are no leaders to this. That's our strength. Get rid of Stardust, get rid of Barbarossa. There's another 5 MGTOW that'll take my place. And this is just within the online community of men who actively know what MGTOW is. You see, the real strength of MGTOW lies in the fact that, as I've said time and time again, we have this unconscious collective of men quietly going about their business who've never even heard of MGTOW. The sleeping giant that these men are, and they operate organically and independently by themselves. And frankly, once they see this pussified tone police MRA movement, or at least the sections of the MRA movement that are like this, once they see the pussified manner in which they conduct their business, you know, the way they put more emphasis on protecting women's feelings than they do toward helping men, if it ever even shows up on their radar, they'll do what they always do. They'll check out, they'll drop out, and they'll do their own thing. And that, my friends, is the only thing that will change a damn thing. Without it, politics won't change, alimony won't change, laws won't change. MGTOW is an organic, unconscious boycott. It's a billion little bees pollinating and pollinating and pollinating. It's a million points of reference. And that's why MRAs get labeled as hate groups and we don't. Because labeling one bee as errant, as deviant, as a threat, leaves a billion other bees all busily pollinating, acting independently of each other in a way that furnishes a large-scale result. And this is how we defend ourselves from feminist accusations of misogyny. And fortunately, because of the way we were built, this is also the way we defend ourselves from MRA manginas who want to call us misogynists or gender ideologues or fascists or whatever new en vogue smear that they come up with. And the best part about all of this is that the organic nature of MGTOW, the million points of reference acting independently but similarly to one another when it counts, don't care whether or not one or some or all of these points of reference are actually misogynists or whatever. Right? Maybe some of these men dropping out, these unconscious MGTOW, maybe some of them are racist. Doesn't stop them from dropping out. Maybe some of them are misogynist and sexist. Doesn't stop them from dropping out either. They act independently. We don't know them and they don't know us. So we don't have to vet them under some never-ending PR campaign for non-misogyny like MRAs have to. Which of course cripples MRAs and puts them in a state of perpetual defense. Now, Stone, as to your reference to hypergamy, all I really want to say about that is that hypergamy is a documented behavior exhibited by women cross-culturally. Now, if you need a scientific source for your own study, here's one. And this is going to be in the description box, by the way. And it's titled Hypergamy, Cross-Boundary Marriages, and Family Behavior. And the abstract reads as follows. We study the rise in marriages between residents of Hong Kong and China following the handover of Hong Kong to China in 1997. Cross-boundary marriages accounted for almost half the marriages registered in Hong Kong in 2006. Because of the large differences in male income between China and Hong Kong, marriages of Hong Kong men with mainland women outnumbered those of Hong Kong women with mainland men sevenfold. Following the handover, Hong Kong women had lower marriage, higher divorce, and higher immigration rates. These outcomes are predicted by our matching model and contradict the hypothesis that cross-boundary marriages were driven by rising education of Hong Kong women. So, again, did the cultural Marxists do this too? No. No, they didn't. What happened was a bunch of men of higher economic status and station were responded to by women with 7 times the amount of marriage in comparison to the native population of men. Simple as that. Now, in terms of Brieffolt's law, well, we don't need much of a scientific study. We can just look at MRAs themselves. I've said this before. Now that being an anti-feminist is trendy, right? Women are calling themselves women against feminism. And of course, they no longer can derive any further benefit from associating with MRAs, so they discard any association with them and proudly say on their own websites that they share no affiliation with them. Women derive no benefit from male MRAs. they get rid of them, they'll ride out this little anti-feminist fad and laugh at the MRA white knights who made it all possible. Now, finally, back to the bit about me saying that women are the enemy, and this is when I'd like to go back to you saying that I'm more radical than my good friend Razorblade Candy, because he states in one of his videos openly and plainly that yes, women are an enemy of men in his videos. He of course goes on to explain in detail with tons of context that you leave out and conveniently ignore as well. But either way, the fact that you made this distinction between himself and myself shows, again, that you either have very little knowledge of the body of work that Razorblade Candy has put forward and decided to just assume he's, quote, less radical than I am, or, and this is what I suspect, that you have a bias towards myself and Stardust in particular, and that bias is showing right now. So you go on to quote mine me and select clips from my videos, which very old videos, by the way, where I say that women are the enemies of men. Now, I'm sure that if you look through the hundreds and hundreds of videos I've uploaded over more than 5 years' time, I'm sure you can find even more selective quote-mined evidence to make it look like I have some seething hatred for women or view them exclusively as my enemy. And it even seems like in this video, you took one clip from one video to pose the question of what I think and answered it with another clip from another video, which is dubious, but whatever. But you can also find clips in my videos such as this. You see, men going their own way is mainly about the institution of male entropy. Men striking out in a million different directions, a great scattering of male intellect and selfishness, and I dare say, dominance. And you can take from that what you will. But within this male entropy is something nestled in there that most women predictably miss or just voluntarily choose to ignore. And that is that men going their own way are one of the few groups of men that believe you're actually capable of something better. Feminists and traditionalists and rest of their ilk actually prefer you in the truncated state of mental atrophy you're currently in. They want you there perpetually, all under the auspices of family values or equality or some other bullshit moral crusade. And that's why it's often said by them that, men going their own way are biological determinists. That all we talk about is biological determinism. And to that I say, remember what I told you about myself in a previous video. Barbarossa abhors waste. Barbarossa abhors waste. I wouldn't waste my time telling women what selfish and lazy little dimwit broodmares they've become if I didn't believe they were capable of something better. If I believed they weren't, I wouldn't waste valuable and precious time I won't get back saying it. So this meme, this utterly false meme that men going their own way are obsessed with biological determinism, that we believe that, I believe the term used is that women are insurmountably flawed, and I'll let those disseminating this in their parakeets continue to do so. But consider hearing my opinions on this subject directly from the person and the source of where these accusations are directed. Men going their own way are some of the only people, perhaps in the world, that absolutely insist that both men and women learn to control and, if need be, repress their biological instincts and tendencies. This is one of the main reasons we're so interested in human nature and what it truly means to be human, because within this is the key to forging the future of our species. Within this lies quite literally the difference between us bombing ourselves back to the Stone Age and possibly our own extinction, or instead sending a probe and eventually a manned mission to Jupiter's Europa to drill down and quite possibly discover extraterrestrial multicellular organisms for the first time in human history. Now, these are the parts of my videos that you ignore, of course. Because if you were to watch and listen without your bias, you would see that because I say women behave as enemies to men today, there's no reason why this can't change in the future, and I even encourage a future where men and women effectively coexist for the betterment of humanity as a species, but that wouldn't fall in line with your MGTOW gender ideologue misogynist propaganda you and other MRAs like you have been peddling recently, so you choose to, of course, selectively ignore instances in my videos like this. Either way, I think it's more important to respond in regards to the statements you made about MGTOW insinuating that men are the only ones taking a risk when you enter into mutual partnership with a woman. So again, I want to ask you, do you really believe that women today take any kind of real risk when entering into relationships with men? Recite to me, please, the laundry list of risks women take when entering into relationships with men. How many women do you know paying child support, right? If this relationship leads to marriage, what are the chances that a woman will have to pay alimony in the event of divorce? Why do men voluntarily remain in cheaper-to-keeper marriages, even if he hates being with his wife? What risks do women take, exactly? What risks? I mean, what? Not being believed when they're victims of domestic violence? Oh, that's right, that's men. So do tell me, Stone, the risks that the poor darlings face in relationships. Enlighten me, because I must have missed out on that. And of course, women never say that they want equality and really expect preferential treatment. That's just a Marxist lie. Don't you let those Marxists win by placing responsibility on the female sex. Nope, there's no history of problems with women invading male spaces and reconfiguring the narrative to fit their own agenda. Right? Gamergate, Willy Bumblebee, that was all just a fragment of our imagination. Right? When a woman, a highly gynocentric woman, was being catapulted to a top position in one of the biggest men's rights platforms and going on to embarrass the shit out of the entire manosphere for months after that. That didn't in fact happen. You know, MGTOW certainly haven't always been in conflict with MRAs. This is something that took months and even years to get to this point. But yes, at a time when currently female moderators on men's rights platforms claiming to be MGTOW get to silence and ban them, sure, I assume that most MGTOW are going to want no part of that. And I think in the end we'll be much better for it. And there's a reason why there's no Woolly Bumblebee to point to in the YouTube MGTOW community, because women are told to go fuck themselves when they come over here telling us how to talk and think. Lastly, I have never said, even once, that women should not be allowed to join the men's rights movement. They can join all they want. We keep them out of MGTOW. And if MRAs want to cater and pander to them while they emote any core beliefs and principles you might have had out of existence, eventually be my guests. And keep your little fake understanding. Alright? No. Stone, MGTOW aren't damaged. We're not some diseased faction of men that you MRAs need to fix. You're not our therapists or our anger management life coaches. No, we like being MGTOW. We like being this way. So do us a favor and keep your fake compassion, guy. We're sick of MRAs such as yourself talking to MGTOW like you're some therapist. From where I'm standing, you guys are the dysfunctional ones, not us. So save that Dr. Phil fake-ass shit for somebody else, please.
The fourth element of MGTOW ideology is projection as protection, dismissing all dissent. I've noticed that when someone like me challenges any aspect of this ideology that these ideological MGTOWs embrace, they tend to react by projecting motives onto their opponent. You're a white knight. You're thinking with your dick. You're a traditionalist. You must have a tradcon agenda. What are you so afraid of? All I'm doing is going my own way. Why does that threaten you so much? You're afraid of MGTOW. You're concern trolling. You must be very upset. That tells me I must be striking a nerve. Gee, I'm getting negative reactions from people. This must mean that I'm right. They really seem to be convinced that they already know everything. So, unfortunately, there's really no point in trying to argue or debate with them. They'll just assign a straw man position to your argument and dismiss what you have to say. This is how they build and maintain their echo chamber, their bubble, their safe space, if you will, or more aptly, their spaceship, which takes them progressively further away from planet Earth. The fifth element of MGTOW ideology is apathy and nihilism. Don't be an activist, be selfish. Look after number one. We don't care. Ideological MGTOWs will often claim that they don't care, which is actually a very difficult thing to prove. They will also try to prove that they have nothing to prove. They make it known that they feel no obligations, that they don't want any burdens, that they really can't be bothered, that they don't owe you any arguments or explanations, and that they just don't care what you or anyone else thinks. The I don't care mantra is a recurring theme amongst ideological MGTOWs, and this goes along with the I have nothing to prove argument and the why do you care argument. They will often say that they don't care about political correctness or how they are perceived by the masses. They will claim to have nothing to lose and not to be concerned about their society. They will say, I'm not your janitor. It's not my job to clean up your broken society. And they understand one basic thing. They understand that not caring is ultimately what frees people from outside influences, from being used, manipulated, and controlled. Some of them endorse helping by refusing to help, or refusing to be a hero, but others really just don't care. Some of them endorse going galt or going on strike by refusing to lift a finger for society. Some will say, why should I care about society? Society doesn't care about me. In other words, some see themselves as having a reciprocal relationship with society in general, and they want to opt out. Of course, that's not how society actually works. Society is not a reciprocal relationship between each individual and itself. It's merely the end product of countless reciprocal relationships between individual people. And some of them will say that that is what MGTOW is really all about: going your own way and hating your society, and being a true rebel by wholeheartedly embracing and endorsing apathy and nihilism. My answer to the question of why do you care is because I do. Why do you care about my reasons for caring? So in conclusion, I fully support the MGTOW lifestyle and the MGTOW movement, and I wish MGTOWs all the best in their endeavors. But for obvious reasons, I don't agree with the essentialism, the sophistry, the misogyny, the projection, and the apathy that I see prominent MGTOW ideologues promoting.
Now, you do realize that all of your arguments you're making right now can be used exactly for feminists to claim that you use projection and protection, right? We call feminists manginas. We tell them they're scared of the men's movement. We tell them they have a feminist agenda because they do, and so do you. You want us to shut up about women. You want us to lobotomize ourselves and revert back to the amateur bullshit the men's rights movement will be peddling for the next couple of decades to no effect. Feminism, 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 ad nauseum, rinse, wash, repeat. We ain't going back to that lame shit. Perhaps, using your own logic, we can say that this is how MRAs build their echo chamber, their safe space. Their kumbaya, we are men and women, we are the world, drink the anti-feminist, wait, I'm sorry, that's too offensive, non-feminist Kool-Aid that will take us away to the alien spacecraft behind the Hale-Bopp comet where never a generalization is made ever again, and women and feminism have nothing to do with each other, and where we all live in gendered harmony after Ron Paul has banished feminism single-handedly to the lake of fire, where Karl Marx will preside over the denizens of hell for all of eternity. Maybe it's you guys that are doing this. Now, feminism, of course, is a problem, but again, bickering with feminists perpetually and never delving deeper into the root causes of these issues only, and I want to reinforce this point here, only strengthens feminism. It adds to their victim narrative. You see, MGTOW don't know everything, but we sure as fuck know that no politician and no bullshit crusade against cultural Marxism and no constant litany of complaints about feminism forever and ever amen is going to help us. You go write your congressman if you want. What's going to happen is you're going to get laughed at or ignored. You go talk about what's fair to politicians and women and feminists if you want. You go beg mommy and daddy government to be nice to you if you want, right? Have fun. And of course, let me know how it turns out if you want. But until you actually achieve something of substance, you have no authority to tell men how to proceed, politically speaking. So what MRAs are effectively doing, and have been doing for decades now, is tossing ice cubes at the sun and calling it activism, right? And they want you to fund their giant ladder to the moon that the laws of physics state cannot work. And they frame that as legitimate activism. And whenever MGTOW pointed out, they say, well, at least we're doing real on-the-ground work. Aw. See, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. You see, what MGTOW do is we teach you to enrich your own lives by allowing you to understand yourself and the environment around you and how it all works, especially in regards to gender. And this, in comparison to the MRAs, is something that immediately enriches the life of men. And if you need to know how, I refer you to the countless amount of men who have messaged me directly. Feel free to say it in the comment section if you want. Message me directly saying that I saved them from both marriage and a basically 100% insured divorce by teaching them about things like female nature and hypergamy and the Walt, as well as their own natures as men. You know, teaching them about the very things that you MRAs are telling us not to talk about. MGTOW actually betters men's lives and translates to a better financial station, an avoidance of legal enslavement via the marriage contract, a new sense of value and purpose, and a new sense of masculinity. That's what MGTOW offers men. And what's the initial investment up front? I don't know. Don't get married. Start keeping your own money in your pocket. Stop letting society tell you what it means to be a man. Figure it out for yourself. These are essentially costless investments. And that's why feminists and even you MRAs will never be able to bring MGTOW under your whitewashed, politically correct fold. Because MGTOW pays in dividends. It benefits men now, today, in their individual lives, and it doesn't require a belief in some MRA religion that tells us one day, far, far off into the distance, we're going to defeat feminism, right? We all know that in order to achieve this, and I don't mean making Anita Sarkeesian look bad. That's not defeating feminism. We all know that doing things like repealing VAWA and making sure that it stays repealed is decades or even possibly hundreds of years away. And even after, it requires constant vigilance to maintain if it even happens at all. We know that. Now we're going to wrap this up here and I apologize for the length of this video. It's really just exhaustingly long. We're going to wrap this up here by delving a bit deeper into this same as the feminist meme. Particularly the men's rights movement's phobia of ever doing anything that feminists have ever done, even if it would actually be beneficial to men. You see, I don't call it the men's movement anymore, or the men's rights movement anymore. Because I think the appropriate term is now the anti-feminist movement, because at this point, the key descriptive term for the so-called men's rights movement is anti-feminism. Bickering with feminists takes precedence over men and men's issues. At least currently they do. You see, right now, the men's rights movement has adopted this kind of dichotomy-based great evil versus great good, nuanceless position. And let me give you an example of how the men's rights movement has slowly morphed into the ineffective, sticking it to Tumblr and Twitter feminist movement. An example of this is how the men's rights organization Cafe placed an award for the arrest and conviction of the MRA that some feminist said crept up on her in the dark of night and, punched her or assaulted her or whatever. Now look at what's being done here. It's so important to these people to tarnish feminism that they're willing to place men at risk in doing so in a supposed movement for men and boys. And don't get me wrong, I understand what they were trying to achieve in doing this. I understand that they were banking on the attack being manufactured. I know they were depending on the fact that feminists tend to manufacture male aggression for attention and financial gain in victimology, right? So they put the reward up, speculating that no one would collect it based on the likely behavior of feminists, or should I say a likely behavior of feminists that manufactures victimhood. So I know very well what they were trying to achieve. I know what they were banking on. And I also know that another likely feminist behavior, and I'm sure this came up during the conversation surrounding the decision to post this reward, at least if these MRAs were worth their salt. Another likely behavior is the framing of men and falsely accusing men of crimes they didn't commit and having them tossed in jail, even though they're innocent. And so the people who posted this reward must have decided then that it's an acceptable risk to provide a financial incentive for feminists to falsely accuse a man of assault, an assault they believe didn't even occur. They had to consider the fact that feminists could have said, okay, these MRAs are posting a reward. Let's just say that it was this poor schmuck who did it, right? Who cares? He's a man, he's an oppressor anyway, right? And all to do what? All to do what? Score a blow against feminists? That's what it comes to, isn't it? The men's movement cares more about sticking it to feminists than they do about men, and if in the process of sticking it to feminists, we have to risk some innocent men, then who cares? Because, like the cultural Marxist conspiratards, the men's rights movement has adopted feminism as their Kralazak, their typhoon struggle that everybody and anything is worth sacrificing to. It's a religion. I want you to read this comment by a subscriber of mine in response to my posting a video where I expressed distrust of the recent Sexodus articles, and specifically how these articles may be just a documenting of the men dropping out phenomenon in order to find a way to simply figure out ways to get men back on the plantation, so to speak. And a response to those sentiments was this. This was a comment, and I'm going to put this up in the video so that you can read it yourself. It says, quote, "I think you're being too hard on this article. For the most part, it's a good article. You can't expect a mainstream website to publish an article that's as scathing of female nature and frankly male nature as a hardcore MGTOW is. The intelligent reader can read between the lines." Now, I actually agree with this comment up until this point. Because after that, the comment continues and says, if any real cultural change comes from the MGTOW phenomenon, this is where I disagree. If any real cultural change comes from the MGTOW phenomenon, we'll have to put up with the, quote, feminism euphemism for quite some time, if not forever. Forever. Now, in response to this comment that we'll always have to just pretend it was all just feminism, possibly forever. I mean, listen to that, forever. As in the same amount of time it would take to extinguish the sun by tossing snowballs at it, the same amount of time it would take to build a ladder to the moon. The first thing that came to mind was how wrought with doublethink that portion of the comment was. I mean, I've got nothing against this guy. I don't even know him, and I'm not bashing him personally, but fuck. Come on, man. That's like 1984 dystopian level untruth. I mean, I hate to do it to you, but I'm going to have to read a passage from 1984 on war and untruth before I can even begin to respond to that portion of the comment. In 1984, it says, quote, "It is precisely the inner party that war hysteria and hatred of the enemy are strongest. In his capacity as an administrator, it is often necessary for a member of the inner party to know that this or that item of war news is untruthful. And he may often be aware that the entire war is spurious and is either not happening or is being waged for purposes quite other than the declared ones. But such knowledge is easily neutralized by the technique of doublethink. Meanwhile, no inner party member wavers for an instant in his mystical belief that the war is real and that it is bound to end victoriously with Oceania, the undisputed master of the entire world." Now your comment, Grambler1, illustrates in one paragraph what the entirety of this 15,000 word video attempts to define. You're saying that in this war, and we are at war, that we should lie to ourselves for the greater good. I've got an Arab-Israeli war that's been going on for 1,000 years as evidence of what happens when we just pretend and lie to ourselves for the purposes of order and structuring civilization. What happens once those lies start being questioned? In religion's case, with the advent of science. What happens is the barbarism of the people who structure their civilization around a dishonest foundation comes billowing up to the surface, and you get war and destruction and chaos. We can't afford the "it was all just feminism" euphemism anymore. It's not even a euphemism, it's a lie. We can't afford an MRA "it was all just feminism" inquisition, right? This is the same type of lie that almost sent Galileo to the gallows. You know, a lot of these MRAs who like to call MGTOW angry or bitter haven't, as this comment demonstrates, given much thought to exactly what it is that's making men or MGTOW angry. It's not women. It's not rejection. It's not any of these things. What makes them angry is the fact that their whole lives they've been told lies, or euphemisms as you call them, about how women view them as men. We're done with the lies. We're done with euphemism. We're done. That's all I gotta say for now. For any of you wishing to send links or information, please make sure to send them to my email, Barbarossa with 2 A's and 2 S's, 930@gmail.com. So I'll repeat that, Barbarossa930@gmail.com. And more to come soon. Thanks for listening, gentlemen.